Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
The largest union talk radio program in the South. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator Adam Keller. If you've got anything to add, you can leave us a voicemail. We won't be opening the phone lines until the second half of the program today, but we can always take voicemails. We might respond to that on the next show. That is 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857 if you would like to leave us a voicemail. You can also leave us a note at tvlr.fm/contact. We do check those emails. Appreciate everybody sending us notes over there. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Got a good show lined up for you today. We are going to be talking about how meatpacking workers won the first new pension plan in the industry in 40 years. Really exciting. Really excited for that conversation later in the program. Also going to be talking about the Southern Worker Action Summit out in, I think it's in North Carolina?
South Carolina.
That's going to be a good time talking to Letitia Zavala about that here in just a moment. Before we get to that, though, I wanted to just spend a little bit of time on this Elon Musk Trump stuff. Because obviously, that's what everybody's talking about, and there are union implications in this too. And so, just for like a really brief play-by-play, I think that most folks who are going to be listening to this know about that Trump and Musk are fighting. But just for really brief play-by-play, Elon Musk got upset about the big beautiful bill. He thinks it's too big. Elon Musk doesn't like the bill because it still gives too much money to poor people and takes too much money from rich people. Fundamentally, that is his problem with it, which is crazy considering that this bill is going to be the biggest cut to Medicaid in ages. We're going to see it also cuts, the premium subsidies for the healthcare marketplace. It's going to end up throwing like 10 to 15 million people off of their health insurance over the next 10 years. People are going to die because of it. Food stamps are getting cut. Just lots of, clean energy jobs are going to be killed because it takes back some of the Inflation Reduction Act tax credits. It's worth underscoring all of this happened because in spite of the fact that this bill takes more money from poor people than any bill, since like Reagan, and gives more money to rich people than like any bill since Reagan. Despite that, Elon Musk is like blowing up his marriage to Donald Trump because of this. Because it's too charitable to poor folks. It's worth understating that, or it's worth like underscoring that's the genesis of this, of this argument. And so Trump gets upset. He says Musk has Trump derangement syndrome. And then Musk says that without me, Trump would have lost the election. Democrats would control the House and Republicans would be 51-49 in the Senate. Such ingratitude. And, Faz Shakir pointed out on Twitter, and this is a really good point, that it's, here's another point, just as we were observing this fight play out. Here's something to take note of. Faz Shakir says, just so we are all on the same page here, when billionaires give huge amounts of money to candidates, they expect something in return, and that is often about prioritizing them in policy decisions over working class people who have far less power. And that's exactly right. Elon Musk funded himself as an individual 25% of the Trump campaign, right? And so obviously, he expects some sort of repayment for that. And it's bad that we live in a society where one person can fund 25% of a presidential campaign. That is bad for society, right? And even if, I don't know if Elon Musk hadn't intervened, would Trump have lost? It's impossible to know what would have happened in that case, but it's not on its face an implausible assertion, right? I mean, it's at least plausible that Musk, given how close the election was, Musk's money was a determining factor. And no single person should have that amount of power. And we live in a society where that is the case, where, regardless of whether he was the thing in the election, he has an enormous amount of political power. Elon Musk does. And he shouldn't. And he only has that power because of how much money he has, of money that was created by working people, value that was created by working people that he has been able to steal and hoard for himself. Okay? So it's bad that billionaires exist and that they have so much power over our political life. And then, the spat continued, and Musk said, time to drop the really big bomb. Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. That's the real reason they haven't been made public. Have a nice day, DJT. Mark this post for the future. The truth will come out. He has since deleted that tweet. That's a relatively new development. He deleted that tweet this morning. But, it's like, that's another thing that maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I don't know. It's well known that Trump and Epstein were associates. Trump appointed multiple people who had a hand in giving Epstein, a light touch previously. He appointed them to various positions of power in his first administration. And, so maybe there's something there, maybe there's not. But if it's true, then what that means is that Elon Musk kept quiet about a pedophile until that pedophile wanted to give too much money to poor people and not enough money to people like him. So, doesn't speak well. Either way, if it's not true and Elon Musk is just saying this and lying, it doesn't speak well to him. And if it is true, it also does not speak well of Elon Musk. Okay, so there you go. That's the play-by-play. And over the course of this conversation, obviously, very many people interjected and put their 2 cents in. One of the people to do that was Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon, former key Trump advisor, still, Trump world resident. Here's what he had to say about Elon Musk and SpaceX as it relates to this feud.
Know anything. He's a know-it-all. He knows some engineering. Don't get me wrong. I give a hat tip for that, but he doesn't know anything about the real world. Doge was, and for any fanboys that still exist, while you're wrapping up in your cape tonight, understand on Doge, he didn't find any fraud. There's plenty of fraud out there. He didn't find. This was President Trump's first complaint. Was this all BS? Right, with the Doge. The act that President Trump should be taking immediately, I think, when he threatens to take one of the big programs out of SpaceX, President Trump tonight should sign an executive order calling for the Defense Production Act to be called in SpaceX and seize SpaceX tonight before midnight.
There you go. So nationalize SpaceX, says Steve Bannon. And for those of you, and there are probably a lot of people who don't know about this, but one of the things that happened over the course of the fight was that Elon Musk said he's going to be decommissioning SpaceX's, one of the things that brings materials and people to and from the International Space Station. SpaceX is one of the biggest providers of, travel to and from the space station. So it is actually genuinely a national security risk, a safety risk to the people and the goods on the International Space Station that Elon Musk, one of the things that he said was that they're going to be decommissioning this program. And so it is actually a national security risk that we have this company in the hands of one billionaire who is, unstable. And so, just generally speaking, The space program should be under the authority of the U.S. government. It should be under NASA, just generally speaking, but also specifically with respect to Elon Musk, his specific instability and incoherence and, drug problems, frankly, make it actually a security risk. And so we should actually nationalize SpaceX, take it over. The U.S. government should run it. Ben Burgess has an article about this in Jacobin where he expands on this argument and makes the case that we should be nationalizing SpaceX. Here's a couple of the things that he wrote about it. SpaceX provides the only vehicle that astronauts use to get on and off the International Space Station. In the last quarter of 2023, a jaw-dropping 90% of pounds sent into orbit were put there by SpaceX. As Matt Stoller notes, by any reasonable standards, that makes it a monopolist in launching satellites. And SpaceX's operation of the Starlink service turns the existence of a heavily state-subsidized private space program, which is bad enough, into something far worse. Whatever you think of the war in Ukraine, for example, it's absurd that Elon Musk's personal decisions about sharing Starlink terminals with the Ukrainian military makes a real difference to the course of that war. Starlink being owned by SpaceX and SpaceX being owned by Elon Musk means that a single oligarch de facto gets to set his own privatized foreign policy. Steve Bannon, of all people, has made the very reasonable suggestion that the Defense Production Act could be used as a legal basis for nationalizing SpaceX. Bannon, of course, is an arch reactionary, and he's only floated a temporary takeover until we can get some stable management. But why shouldn't we just have this key part of the space program, which comes with militarily important satellite internet infrastructure, in public hands on an ongoing basis? None of the usual arguments against nationalization hold much water with respect to SpaceX, Ben Burgess says. SpaceX is not one firm among many jostling to get ahead in a vibrantly competitive marketplace. It's a behemoth that, as of last September, owned 2/3 of the satellites in space and a ridiculous share of internet traffic. And it's been repeatedly accused of monopolistic practices. Nor are the company's profits organically created by the free market. Any story about SpaceX as a font of private innovation because it's free from state interference would be hard to square with the economic reality of the many billions it's reaped from numerous contracts, some public and some classified, with NASA and the Department of Defense. Without that, SpaceX, in anything like its current form, would be unthinkable. The last thing that he says is that there are two core differences between public money being used to fund a corporate giant to provide what would be state functions in any normal society and the same money being spent in-house on a publicly owned version of SpaceX. One is that we wouldn't have a big portion of that money being funneled into Elon Musk's net worth and the portfolios of Tesla's big institutional investors like Founders Fund and Draper Fisher Jurvetson. The other is that it would be brought into the sphere of democracy. Decisions about where Starlink terminals would be sent, when or if important spacecrafts would be decommissioned, and the rest would be made institutionally by whatever department or agency housed it, which would in turn answer to and follow the directives of the elected branches of government. They wouldn't be hostage to the whim of a single oligarch. And that's the key there, that we should not have a company that is actually so important to the national security of this country, to the space program of this country, under the thumb of one person. It doesn't matter that it's Elon Musk. It's worth noting that it's Elon Musk because Elon Musk is so uniquely sort of erratic, but it shouldn't be under the thumb of any individual. The power needs to be dispersed. And, when we talk about, people like to talk about the founders. The reason that the founders set up the country in the way that they did, it was to disperse power from a monarch. And we are entering a society where people have the powers that monarchs used to have. And so we should take away that power from them and distribute it among the people and the elected representatives of the people. So there you go. Nationalize SpaceX. Steve Bannon is right, and we look forward to Donald Trump executing on that advice.
Well, the Steve Bannon thing just reminds me that a broken clock is right
That's
twice
right.
a day. And he got his 2 times, right? He said nationalize SpaceX and deport Elon Musk. So there was his 2. We'll take it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right. He mentioned that Elon Musk was at least at one point an illegal immigrant, is what he said. And I mean, like it's worth like looking into that for the people who care about that sort of thing. It's an interesting it's it's an interesting sort of thing that happened. I mean, there's actually there's actual real evidence to suggest that he like overstayed his student visa, or he got the wrong sort of visa and started working immediately after being a student. I mean, it's not like there's nothing there. So, maybe we'll do that.
Certainly more cause for suspicion than some of the cases we've seen of people being terrorized, kidnapped, and deported.
Yeah, for sure. Have we got Letitia in the Zoom? Letitia Zavala is the co-coordinator of El Futuro es Nuestro. We're really excited to have her on. El Futuro es Nuestro is one of the co-conveners for the Southern Workers Assembly's Southern Worker Action Summit that is taking place next weekend. Letitia, welcome to the Valley Labor Report. We're really excited to have you.
Hello, thank you for having us.
Really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Can you explain to the audience what the Southern Worker Action Summit is?
Yes, the Southern Workers Assembly is hosting an event for all workers of the South to come together and strategize around what's best for the worker movement. We've got workers from all sectors coming: farm workers, fast food workers, construction workers, students, all sorts of workers that are being impacted by the situation with the current administration.
Well, and what kind of program is the Southern Workers Assembly and the other participants putting together? Like, what are the sorts of workshops and things that workers will be participating in?
Oh, I'm so excited about the workshops. We're having workshops on how to organize committees in workplaces, how to prepare for strikes, how to mobilize Black and brown workers together. We've got workshops on immigrant justice and histories of struggle and areas where we've learned and we've grown, where we've got elders coming to share their stories on what has worked in the past and what has needs to be improved.
And when I was talking to some folks with the Southern Workers Assembly about trying to set up this interview, they mentioned that you were that your organization was a co-convener. You and the Southern Workers Assembly are hosting this summit. Can you explain a little bit more about your organization and why you wanted to be so closely involved with putting on this event?
Yes, so we're a farm worker rights organization. We started in 2022, a group of farm workers that come here mainly on H-2A visas. They come here to work the crops of tobacco, sweet potato, and Christmas trees. They realized that nobody else had the power to help them in real crisis like the pandemic other than themselves. And so they started organizing and working together. They launched a campaign to fight against the deaths that were happening in the fields. During the pandemic, we lost at least 12 lives in the fields of North Carolina. And after the pandemic, we continued to see workers die from heat stroke and suicide and bad working conditions and the lack of medical attention. So we've been mobilizing and organizing around the right to medical attention, the right to breaks, access to water, and our own kitchens in the fields. And to us, it's important because we are at the bottom of the food chain, and there are other workers that depend on us for our work. And so if we're not organized, how can we really create change? So we're excited to be in collaboration with meat packers, with restaurant workers, and with other people in the food industry to gain more power and gain respect.
Yeah, absolutely. The farm worker organizing is incredibly important at this moment, I think, and I'm sure that the folks that you're organizing with are starting to feel really scared right now. I mean, how are folks reacting to what the administration is doing, and what are some of the things that your organization is trying to do in response? If you don't mind me asking.
You know what? I think this is a unique time for us because we've been scared for decades. Deportations have always been present. And I think this is an opportunity for us because other people are finally identifying with the struggle that we've had for years. And so we're eager to come out and share our learnings and our experience with being threatened consistently. And I think we're angry and we're ready to fight back.
Fantastic. Where can folks go to learn more about the Southern Worker Action Summit if they're interested in that?
You can visit our website. It's the Southern Workers Assembly.org. You will find a tab for the summit. There's the agenda. You can register. I think actually we've closed the registration because we have over 300 people coming. But there's gonna be a lot of follow-up. So stay in touch regardless, and we hope to see y'all there.
And where is it?
It's going to be in Spartanburg, South Carolina, at the Hilton Garden Inn.
Gotcha. Thank you so much, Letitia. Is there anything else that you wanted to make sure that you leave our audience with before we let you go?
I think it's really important. It's a really important time, right? This administration has been really good at sending attacks equally and to all sectors, to all groups of people. And if people are in doubt about what to do and where to go, the Workers' Assembly is where we're educating folk. We're learning about the politics, connecting where administrative policies can affect our workplaces and how our community can affect the working conditions of our workplaces and how we can improve. So please get involved. Let us know if there's questions. If you want to organize a committee, that's what we're here for.
All right. Letitia Zavala, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. I really appreciate it. Yeah, hopefully we're going to be able to get somebody from the Southern Workers Assembly on after the summit to do sort of a debrief. These sorts of events, I think, are really great. I've been to, Labor Notes does similar types of gatherings, and, the focus is really on bringing together rank and file folks rather than, union officials and things like that. And I've been to both sorts of events where you have a bunch of union officials and where it's primarily focused on the rank and file. And I have always gotten more out of the events and the summits and the, summer schools and conventions where the focus is on connecting rank and file workers, educating rank and file workers, learning from rank and file workers, and trying to think about paths forward rather than, the stuff that's primarily people are going who are already, full-time working for unions, are leaders, quote unquote, or union officials. I've just always found that those events are, I don't know, they're just less engaging to me, and so I'm sure that this is going to be a really great event. And particularly, these folks are folks from the South, focused on organizing the South. The Chattanooga Area Labor Council president is going to be there. I was talking to him earlier this week, and he said that he's going to be there. So maybe we can get him to call in afterwards and talk to us and give us a debrief. He's a good guy. So
yeah, I mean, I'm really proud of what they're doing. I love to hear that over 300 folks are registered for this event because Southern Workers Assembly is doing really important work. especially in areas with really low union density, right? South Carolina, North Carolina have the lowest union density of any state in the country. So that's really important that they're trying to kind of fill some gaps. There's a lack of infrastructure and ecosystem with the labor movement here in the South, particularly in less dense states. And so, what they're doing is not just working with rank and file union members, but rank and file workers generally, right? Unorganized workers. They're trying to grow this movement and provide space to educate, agitate, and organize workers who, don't have unions, don't know where to find a union. Maybe there's not a union really around in their area. For their industry. And something else I really appreciate about Southern Workers Assembly is their industrial focus. They're really focused on building power throughout industries and not just particular workplaces, and connecting people from different workplaces that are in the same industry. And they're working to get people in strategic workplaces, right? I mean, and that's something that's really, really important. If you want to make a change, something you can do is pick a job that is strategic. Go to work somewhere where you can possibly organize, where there's leverage to organize, where there's maybe some momentum to organize, right? So if you're listening and you're like, what could I do to get involved in the labor movement? It could be, going to work at Starbucks, or, going to work at Mercedes, or going to work at a place that has organizing already underway, or maybe it's organizing with your workplace where you're at currently, right? And Southern Workers Assembly is a great resource to find out how to do that and get plugged in with other people who are actively doing that and building power in their community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're doing really great work, and excited to see what happens. South Carolina, like you said, has, I think, actually the lowest union density in the country. So having it there, I think, is meaningful.
Yeah, it's kind of a symbolic thing,
Yeah.
I think, to do it in the least unionized state in the South, in the country. To bring workers together to talk about building a working class movement. I think that's really cool. It's powerful. Regret that I can't be there, but I really am excited to hear, reports from how it goes. A lot of their strength is concentrated in the Carolinas, but I know they have a presence outside of there, Georgia, Tennessee, other areas. If folks in Alabama are listening, definitely, reach out to Southern Workers Assembly if you're interested in getting more involved with them. We consider them someone we always want to work with and partner with here in Alabama and move this movement forward.
Yeah, absolutely. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number. If you want to leave us a voicemail, feel free to do that. We'll be opening the lines later on in the program. At about 11 o'clock. In the second half of the program, we're going to be talking to the co-chair of the National Political Committee for DSA. Excited for that conversation. We're also going to be talking about the tentative agreement that the American Postal Workers Union reached last week with the Postal Service. The TLDR is that it looks a lot like the NALC's TA, and so, interested in how APWU members are going to react to that, and we'll have President Mark Dimenstein on the show next week to talk about that and a lot more. Talk about that and the attacks on the Postal Service, the new Postmaster General, what they're expecting from that. So
that'll be a really good interview.
Yeah, looking forward to having Dimenstein on. I'm a Dimenstein head. What can I say? So yeah, we'll see what happens there. We're going to take a break really quick, and we're going to be right back with Last Week in Southern Labor, and we're going to be talking to Wendell Young, a UFCW president, United Food and Commercial Workers president, and talking about how they won a new pension plan for 26,000 meatpacking workers at 14 facilities across the country, including here in the South. So, this is a huge, huge win. It's going to absolutely change the lives of the folks who are going to be able to get this pension. So really excited for this conversation. Stay tuned, folks. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report, and we will be right back.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit NALC.org. Unite Here is also a supporter of the Valley Labor Report. They are a labor union that represents 300,000 working people across Canada and the United States. Their members work in the hotel, gaming, food service, manufacturing, textile, distribution, laundry, transportation, and airport industries. You can learn more about Unite Here at unitehere.org.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Tennessee to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. Today, we just had a conversation with Letitia Zavala about the Southern Worker Action Summit. We also talked about why we should nationalize SpaceX. If you missed those, you can find it on YouTube and Facebook. And shortly, we will be joined by Wendell Young, president of UFCW Local 1776, to talk about the new meatpacking workers national contract that includes a brand new pension plan. Almost unheard of today, but union meatpacking workers want it. We'll find out how in a moment. Going to be talking about all of that and more on the show. If you want to be part of the program, we've got a phone number. You can always leave us a voicemail, and we might respond to it on the next show. That phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can leave a voicemail at any time, and we'll be opening the phones in about an hour. So if you want to call in during the second half of the show, you are free to do that, and that's when we'll be opening the lines. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the show, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, TVLR.fm, but we are also on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at the Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. So if you want to become a sustaining donor to the program or make a one-time donation, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate or patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. We've got a bunch of really cool merch for sale at tvlr.fm/store. Hats, shirts, and stickers. And finally, if you're a member of a union, you should think about getting your local or national to sponsor the show. You can reach out to us for more details about that at tvlr.fm/contact.
Hey, good morning, y'all. Let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. And we want to welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WGOW, Means TV, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out. And as most of you know, we are not media professionals, just some diehard unionists who want to amplify the voices of the working class here in the American South. We're hoping this project can make a difference on that front, and we can't do it without you. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in, whether you're a loyal fan or a first-time listener. We really appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Absolutely. And with that, we will get to Last Week in Southern Labor, where we take a look at what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to this week from May 30th to June the 6th. And also, as this is a new month, McKenna Schuler's newsletter came out about organizing Florida. So all information on Florida's public sector union elections comes from that Substack. You can check it out on her website, caringclassrevolt.substack.com, where you'll get more information about Florida labor as well as exclusive details about the union elections that are going to be referenced here. And you should also subscribe to our newsletter at tvlr.fm, because the Last Week in Southern Labor segments are always shorter than the newsletter. So if you want to get the full exhaustive list of what happened last week in Southern Labor, then you got to subscribe to the newsletter. In new union campaigns, 6 workers at the Memphis Symphony Orchestra in Memphis, Tennessee, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, IATSE, Local 69. 200 workers at Nichiha USA, which makes components for buildings in Macon, Georgia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Brotherhood of Boilermakers, IBB. 16 workers at Starbucks in Ridgeland, Mississippi, filed a petition to hold a union election with Starbucks Workers United. Nationwide, the union won its 600th union victory last week. 8 workers at the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute in Atlanta, Georgia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters, Local 728. And 56 workers at Jefferson County Schools in Monticello, Florida, filed a petition to unionize with the Jefferson County Education Association. In election results, 185 workers at UNFI in Pompano Beach, Florida, voted in favor of unionization with the Teamsters Local 769. A decertification petition was withdrawn at Sign Crafters in St. Louis, Missouri. The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW Local 1, will still represent the 4 workers there. Following a decertification petition being filed, the United Food and Commercial Workers UFCW Local 1000 disclaimed interest in representing 20 workers at Vitamin Cottage Natural Foods Market in Norman, Oklahoma, so the union was decertified. And 2 different units of tech workers at the Washington Post in Washington, D.C. both voted to unionize with the News Guild, CWA. In one unit, 76 workers voted 46-8 in favor of unionization, and in the other, 227 workers voted 125-30 in favor. 2,875 workers employed by St. Lucie Public Schools in Port St. Lucie, Florida, voted 619-10 in favor of recertifying the Education Association of St. Lucie as their union. In grievances, unfair labor practices, and court cases, a federal judge granted a preliminary injunction last week, stopping the Trump administration from rescinding the collective bargaining agreement that the American Federation of Government Employees, AFGE, has with the TSA, with the judge saying that the union has shown this action was taken in retaliation against the union's First Amendment protected speech. The National Labor Relations Board is saying that Grindr engaged in illegal union busting with its return to office order, noting that the company used this as a fig leaf to get rid of the union, citing as evidence the fact that the contractors who now perform the functions, those same functions that Grindr's employees used to, get to work from home and not in the office. In strikes and bargaining updates, Trump's Office of Personnel Management is proposing a new rule that would make it easier to fire federal workers, including for, among many other things, failing to furnish testimony, or, in layman's terms, failure to rat on your coworkers. The Federal Workers Legal Defense Fund opposes the new rule. The Trump administration also wants new federal employees GS 5 and above to write essays as a part of their job application process, praising the Trump administration's policies and explaining how their hiring will further his executive orders and administration priorities. Breakthrough beverage drivers in 5 cities in Florida are on strike over alleged unlawful firings and bad faith bargaining. The drivers are unionized with the Teamsters. In political and legislative updates, the D.C. City Council voted to pause a scheduled minimum wage increase for tipped workers that voters had previously voted for in a ballot measure, keeping the tipped minimum wage in the city at $10 an hour. The mayor is proposing rolling back the initiative entirely in next year's budget. Trump and Musk appear to have broken up. Teamsters President Sean O'Brien has taken the occasion to show Donald Trump what a good boy he is by attacking Elon Musk and defending Trump. The AFL-CIO, on the other hand, pointed out that even if Musk really is leaving, he is leaving a lot of damage in his wake and a lot of people behind who will continue to damage federal workers and the public. Unions are being public about their opposition to proposed cuts to the Job Corps program under the Department of Labor. The Painters Union has testimony from one of their apprentices about how important it was to him and helped him turn his life around. The Department of Energy canceled 24 projects totaling over $3 billion from its Office of Clean Energy demonstrations. North America's building trade unions condemned the move, saying this will put many hardworking American blue-collar workers on the unemployment line instead of job sites. The Washington Post interviewed dozens of federal workers who explained how new DOGE requirements are making their work less efficient. In one case, a federal employee explained that a process that previously took less than 1 day now takes a week or more due to having to get so many sign-offs from political appointees. Jordan Barab, a former OSHA official, reviewed Trump's proposed budget as it relates to worker safety and health in great detail. If you're interested, I recommend reading it at jordanbarab.com/ confined space. The long and short of it is that Barab says Trump tells workers to drop dead with his budget that cuts OSHA and MSHA. And one other thing that I forgot to mention in strikes and bargaining updates is obviously that the American Postal Workers Union and the Postal Service reached a tentative agreement last week. Members will be voting on the tentative agreement between now and July. If we missed anything, you can let us know at tvlr.fm/contact, and we'll try to include it in next week's roundup. Have we got Wendell Young in the Zoom?
You do.
Really excited to have this conversation. The UFCW announced a couple of weeks ago the ratification of a first ever national contract in the meatpacking industry that will bring significant wage increases, a newly created paid sick leave program, and with the support of the company JBS, the establishment of a pension retirement plan for 26,000 JBS workers at 14 facilities across the country, among other contract gains. Here to talk to us about that is Wendell Young IV, president of UFCW Local 1776 KS. Wendell, welcome to the Valley Labor Report. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me today, Jacob.
Absolutely. We're really excited about this conversation, and I mean, I've been talking about this new contract like everywhere that I talk about unions for the last 2 or 3 weeks, because it is such good news. And it's, creating a new pension plan, that is just not something that happens every day. And we're going to get into all of that. But before we do that, you're the president of one of the local unions that are affected by this deal. You also have offices within the International Union. And so could you talk to the audience a little bit about your background and, why you have dedicated your life to working in the union?
So I am president of Local 1776, and we represent workers in a lot of different industries throughout Pennsylvania and a little part of West Virginia, what's called the Ohio River Valley area, and a little bit of Hudson Valley, New York. But most of our members, by far, the nearly 35,000 workers we represent are in Pennsylvania, in food processing, in manufacturing, nursing homes, office clerical, retail. Most of our members are retail. Most are retail supermarkets. And that's where I got my start. I went to work in a union supermarket, Teamsters 929 in Philadelphia, in the inner city when I was 16 years old, and soon after ended up in another company, Acme Markets, where I became a member of our union for the first time when I was about 17, 18 years old, and soon became the union shop steward in our store. And I just, pursued my efforts with the union. It led to me where I am today. Now, I was also born in a very pro-union household. My father was a union official, and so I would say by birth I was introduced to it and absorbed into the labor movement. Actually, love being a union representative, and it's the only thing I ever wanted to do. And so I've had every job in the local, organizer. Well, I didn't do clerical jobs, but everything out in the field. Organizing, what we call servicing, enforcing contracts, political action, bargaining contracts, and eventually in 2004 I was elected president. And one of the things I want to point out, our JBS plan is in Hatfield, Montgomery County, right outside of Philadelphia. It's been around a long, long time. When I was a new young organizer in the local, it was called Moyer Packing. It was a locally owned family, like a lot of the beef and protein industry in our country was, meat industry. And my very first day full time on the job with the union at 5 a.m., I went out and hand billed that JBS plant. And about 20 years later, we organized it. And, I think anybody that knows the labor movement, sounds like you do very well. The 80s were a really hard time for organizing. And that was 1983. I hand billed that. And it back then in the Reagan years, especially the early part of the Reagan years with the anti-labor attitudes, it was very difficult. And we really were challenged, but we never gave up on that plant. And as it went through different ownership over the years and things changed, of course, with a better environment in DC, we eventually did organize it. And which gets to, I don't want to preempt your question, so I just want to give you a little background how I got involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great lead up. And also, it's worth making that point whenever we can, that these things can take a long time. I mean, in some ways, your involvement with the JPS, this pension plan being established, in some ways, the story really does start in 1983 when the first time that you handbill this plant, right? And so, I get, as I'm the labor council president in North Alabama, and so I regularly get people coming to me saying, I want to form a union, can we talk? And they'll talk to me for a few weeks or a couple of months even, and they'll start making moves and they'll get kind of slapped down, right? And they'll get discouraged, and maybe not enough people come to their meeting, and they're like, nothing is ever going to change. I've tried this. I've tried it for 6 weeks. I've tried it for 12 weeks, and nothing has changed. And so, I'm giving up at this point. And you can't, if you want to make your workplace better, if you want to make your community better, if you want to win a union, you just can't give up. And if you keep at it, one day you're going to be able to win, right? If the UFCW had given up on JBS, on organizing these meatpacking workers in 1987, after 4 years of trying to organize the plant, right, they wouldn't have a pension plan today. And so I think that's a great thing that you
Jacob,
mentioned that. Yeah.
If I can, it's also, I told you my roots with the Teamsters, and we've maintained a great relationship here in Pennsylvania with the Teamsters. All those years trying to organize it, we took turns. Right. They would take a shot at it. We would take a shot at it. They would take a shot at it. In the end, it ended up being a collaborative effort. They actually sent organizers full time in to help us out. It was a collaborative effort between us and the Teamsters, and with the understanding that it was UFCW organizing it in that particular effort. But I got to also say, my international union played a huge role, especially a guy named Mark Lawrenson, who is the what we call the food processing division director for our national union. And we didn't do it alone, is my point. We had to have allies, and we needed help from international, and everybody did their part, and that's what made it work. And the workers, of course, it's what they wanted. And to get it done, we just knew we couldn't do it by ourselves.
Absolutely. I was really heartened, even though, the election didn't turn out the way that I would have wanted. Hopefully one day, hopefully it doesn't take 20 years, but, I loaned myself for a couple of weeks to the RW campaign at Amazon down in Bessemer. And I saw a lot of people from my union, AFGE, that AFGE had loaned out some of their staff. AFT had loaned out some of their staff. Obviously, UFCW, they're part of the same international, loaned out some of their staff. And so, in a lot of the, especially if we want to take on these big employers like Amazon, it's gonna take coordination and support from unions, and like putting aside kind of our sort of jealous guarding of our territories, and working together to make these things happen. And so the standout news really is that 26,000 workers, they've got a pension plan. They've got access to that now. And so can you talk to us about that? What does it mean? When does the pension plan kick in? What does it look like? And any other details from the contract that you think folks ought to know about?
So I think what's really important to know is that this is something that didn't just materialize this year. Mark Lawrenson, Mark Perrone, our president of our international during this period, made this a priority. Our prior international presidents, 2 in a row, made it a priority. An alliance, when I say priority, not only to organize these plants here in the United States, including ours in Pennsylvania, but to try and consolidate our contracts around the country. And including, our friendship and building a relationship with our Brazilian union counterparts. That was very important because that's where this company's based, and so it took a lot of years. It was incremental. Over the years, we worked at getting the contracts to look more like each other's. And even today, with this new, what most are describing as a master contract, every one of those agreements are not exactly the same. Well, one of the ways that this was made possible is there are some local regional differences, and that's important to recognize those. But we were able to, over the years, get people closer together, and it helped people recognize that. And I hate to sound cliche about it, but we are stronger together. We are we have more power with the employer. The employer didn't just do this because they wanted to, and I think I got to give them a lot of credit for doing it. But let's face it, if we hadn't all come together and organized, and that includes like internally organizing around contract campaigns, not just this contract, past contracts, and literally going to Brazil to develop those relationships with the Brazilian labor unions was very important to even our original organizing. And then over the years, maintaining those relationships, bringing the Brazilians here. They've actually sat, some of those Brazilian union representatives have sat at our bargaining tables over the years to help show that solidarity globally. And it's had a great impact. And ultimately what it led to, the possibility over the past, really about year and a half, getting the company's attention on the fact that, we wanted a master agreement. One of our priorities was to have a defined benefit pension plan, an industry plan for these folks. We've never had one like this before. It's in its infancy. And to your question, it's going to take some time, probably the balance of this year to get all the details together administratively, form the plan, file the paperwork, get the contributions going. But within short order, that plan will be in place, and the employer is going to start putting the contributions in right away. There'll be some education around it with our members because it's going to be new to them. And it's going to be a lot of work, but we had other really good gains that came out of this for all the locals involved around the country, and that was reflected in the overwhelming response in the ratification meetings. Each local ratified independently over about a 2-month period. Ours was one of the first locals to ratify, and it was nearly unanimous, and that's hard to do in a plant. Yeah. With 1,500 people, right? Right. But it was overwhelmingly accepted, and it involved a very significant. And by the way, all the contracts were not on the same term. So in terms of length of time, so our contract actually didn't expire for more than a year. And so one of the challenges pulling everybody together here was that while we were all going to move forward with these new terms, we also were preserving some local differences, but we also are going to have little different expiration dates as we roll out. Like ours is going to expire. It's not a full 3 or 4 year contract, is my point. It's going to expire a little over a year from now in August of 2026. And what our members got was a significant retro wage increase back to August of last year, all retro, plus bonus. On bereavement. I'm sorry.
You're breaking up a little bit. Yeah. I don't know if something happened with your internet.
Let me try and help you with that just a second here.
Yeah.
Going to turn my off and go cellular. That tends to work better.
Yeah, that sounds like a good
Is that
plan.
better?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm sorry about that. But
No worries.
we have increased PTO. We got a tremendous increase in the vacation. Like, it took 15 years to get to 4 weeks. That's now going to be 10 years. And as I already mentioned, a few other things. There's some better sick time provisions. There's, in addition to the base wage increases, there's a number, quite a few upgrades due to people being advanced several grades. In these plants, you have a lot of, you have classifications and grades, right? So we're advancing people, several steps in grades in addition to the wage increases. That's going to compound some of those numbers. It's just overall a really good package. It deals with some things that have been frustrating for a long time. The thing that's getting a lot of attention in today's world, because of the way the laws have gone and the liabilities that companies can end up with. You see DB pensions going away or being frozen. Companies buying out from them with paying off liabilities and walking away from them and using bankruptcy to walk away. So, this is not just unique to the meat industry that we got a defined benefit pension plan. It's unique for anybody in any industry, union or non-union. And so it's a huge accomplishment that's going to, help provide for our real retirement security for the future. Now, look, it's good for everybody. And I recognize that, if someone's close to retirement, this might not make the biggest impact, but this is the kind of thing that's going to have generational impact in terms of generations of future employees, because the longer into the future you look, the bigger this fund's going to get, the more secure those pensions are going to be, the more people will be covered by them. I look at, for example, the pension plan I entered into when I became 16 years old, right? Working in my first, job, a UFCW job at 17 years old, being covered by a pension. And, 16, 17-year-olds don't think much of it. But, I now have almost half a century in that pension plan. I'm in the same plan to this day. And for the members that I've grown up with my whole life in my union, who are now in their 50s and 60s like me, they're going to be receiving benefits from that plan for another 20, 30, 40 years or more, and or their spouses. That's the power of a DB plan. And that's why it makes this such a great achievement.
Yeah, absolutely. And for folks who are listening that may not know, DB stands for defined benefit, and that is the difference between a pension and a 401k. Most people nowadays, if they have a retirement plan at all, they have a 401k, which is defined contribution. You have, you and your employer put in a set amount into the stock market, and you just pray about it. And then, you get whatever's left whenever you retire. A defined benefit pension plan says that the employer is going to pay you a set amount after you retire for the rest of your life. You get a defined benefit. The benefit that you're going to receive, rather than just throwing a set amount of money into the stock market and praying about it, right? So that's why defined benefit pension plans are so important. And you mentioned that, that JBS, they didn't just, give this to y'all out of the goodness of their heart, right? And in fact, if you look up at the reporting about JBS's business practices, they're actually, there's a lot of things that they do wrong. And so it took pressure to make them give this up, the pension plan, and among the other things that you mentioned, the increased PTO, the increased wages, everything like that. And you talked a little about the UFCW's campaign to try to bring people together and coordinate among the other locals. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that? Like, what did that look like, and what sort of pressure did you put on JBS? And was there anything that you had to give up in other parts of the contract to get the pension and the increased wages and things like that?
So, as I said, it started a long, long time ago, the effort to leverage union power, and not just here within the UFCW, but as an example with the Teamsters here locally in PA to help organize the store in the first place. And the Brazilians helped us with that organizing. But, it didn't just involve the global perspective, although that was very important. We took people and members to Brazil. I did one of those trips to go down and meet with them and tell them the problems we were having here years ago. And but those efforts for global solidarity have continued. over the years, and we've brought them here a number of times. When I say we, I mean our union, our national union, and our local union as well, to sit in on shop steward meetings, membership meetings, and even contract negotiations. They could see how the company is really behaving, and that's important because that union's very powerful where the company's headquartered in Brazil. But it's really also been, bringing people together throughout the country. Our effort here is a great example of coordinated bargaining between, more than a dozen locals, all that have their own unique issues, but also shared priorities and goals, and getting people to know each other. And that's the most important part. It's one thing to talk about solidarity and talk about coordinated bargaining, but you got to make it personal. And it's one of the things that Mark Lawrenson has done a great job as our division director out of the UFCW is, he hosts opportunities to get the locals together. I've hosted some of them at our headquarters, not far from the JBS plant. They get hosted at other locals, other places around the country where we'll bring the locals together. When I say bring the locals together, I honestly don't go to most of them myself as president of local. I want the reps that are helping enforce and negotiate contracts. And then more importantly, I want the shop stewards, the rank and file shop stewards from the plants to be there. And that's what all the locals have been doing. And we get them together and we get them talking about what they have in common and why it's important to work together. And it's been years in the making, and it's been incremental, as I said earlier, that, we've had some other successes along the way of getting common terms and having, company-wide discussions on certain subjects. But this is the first time, and it's been our goal to get to this point, that we've had one contract looking forward with the most common terms ever, including accomplishing goals like the improved PTO and the defined benefit pension plan. And, one of the things that's not gotten a lot of attention, and, I happen to think it's the most important, because to the people that get injured, whether it's in a significant accident or whether it's something over time like carpal tunnel, it can be debilitating. It could cost someone their lives. And unfortunately, we've seen that in too many places. And we've seen it right here in our JBS plant and every one of the JBS plants. And, because accidents happen, and these are pretty harsh environments to work in. And we're always striving to improve safety. We have now, on top of what we've already built over the years, one of the best improvements to our safety and ergonomics program. And I'm not going to go really deep into detail, but, it allows us to do more. It requires the company to do more, but it also establishes that we have to share more of what we find in information. Because if you can't really fully understand what's causing something, or, instead of just attacking each other, this language sets up a more collaborative process for us to, head off problems. And if they do occur, make sure they never happen again. And unfortunately, whether it's a serious injury or even more so a death due to an accident, we really have a responsibility. Everyone does to improve that, and we got great new language in that area that I'm really thrilled about.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't like getting those calls where we've lost a person or a family's lost a parent.
Right. And those are obviously the most sudden or those are the most jarring and the most difficult to deal with. But for every person that dies, you have how many people who are permanently or temporarily disabled. You have how many people that lose a week on the job due to an accident, right? I mean, and so improved safety programs absolutely are so important. And you mentioned there that JBS is not, the only meatpacking employer. They're far from it. There's lots of meatpacking and poultry plants and right here in Alabama, where we're broadcasting from, our WDSU and UFCW have a presence at a lot of these meatpacking plants, and there's a lot of them just within an hour drive of from where I'm sitting, like Pilgrim's Pride, Wayne Farms, Tyson. Does the UFCW and our WDSU have a plan to try to expand this sort of plan industry-wide, even beyond JBS?
That is a goal. It's been a goal for a long time. And, again, I give a lot of credit to Mark Lawrenson because he has really driven the process. He's been the leader in this process for a long time to bring together not just the JBS workers that work in this industry, but all those companies and more that you just mentioned, and to bring them together to talk about shared experiences and shared goals, and to try and leverage the industry. So, those efforts are ongoing in other places at different rates of accomplishment. But JBS is the one. And I'll tell you, I think the difference with JBS, I know I've said it a few times, is the help and support and solidarity from the Brazilians and many others in the international trade movement and labor movement, and through global union groups like UNI. And I can't say enough about what great partners the Brazilians have been. And since JBS is the largest protein producer on the planet, they're headquartered in Brazil. They have a huge amount of members in that union. That union's pension funds has also invested in some of the company's advancements over the years, their expansion in other continents, including the U.S. So they can't ignore them too easily. And the Brazilians have legitimate concerns about, if the company's not a good, responsible union employer where they're doing business elsewhere in the world, that's going to come home at some point and be the pattern at home. So we have a mutual bond that's really strong. And they've been very helpful in helping convince the company, let's just say, to do the right thing.
Right. Well, we'll look forward to being able to report on new pension plans at other meatpacking employers. And as we're wrapping up, I noticed that your local is actually where the first Whole Foods workers in the nation decided to unionize. Philadelphia Whole Foods workers unionized with UFCW Local 1776, and this is obvious, like a huge deal. Whole Foods is owned by Amazon. Amazon is a big employer. The Teamsters are actually organizing at UNFI, which is a big distributor for Whole Foods. So that is a big target for the labor movement. And just like we have meatpacking plants in our listening area, we have Whole Foods in our listening area. And so it's not unlikely that somebody is working at a Whole Foods right now, or who works at a Whole Foods is tuning in. And so can you briefly talk about why the workers in Philadelphia decided to organize, and why all Whole Foods workers should join the campaign, and where they can go if they want to learn more?
So first of all, thank you for recognizing this, because these workers, the Center City Philadelphia store, Whole Foods workers, are amazing. They came together earlier in 2024. They went in eyes wide open about the challenge to try and organize under current labor laws in this country, and they know that they're going up against a real Goliath in terms of Amazon, Jeff Bezos, because that's who owns Whole Foods. And they know, and they knew from watching the Teamsters and others and how Amazon has treated them, that they were going to be in for a fight, and that a lot of them would possibly lose their jobs. And then to make things worse, Donald Trump got elected. At around the same time we filed for an election at that store, Trump was elected. And, this company was brutal during the election. They've been brutal since the election. They have fired, both before and since, more than a dozen of our union supporters. We don't want to see them fire anybody, but it was interesting that the things they singled people out for, lots of people who didn't support the union and was known that they didn't get fired for the same things or even disciplined. So what they do know is, that Trump would be a game changer in terms of holding companies responsible. They weren't going to. And one of the first things Trump did was fired not only the head of the NLRB, but the chief counsel there and the only democratically appointed board member, which has all been the subject of litigation. Since then, the administration, Trump's administration, has appointed a chief counsel, and it happens to be an attorney out of Philadelphia who works for a major management law firm who also represents Amazon. So this is a fight that's going to continue. It's going to continue for as long as it takes. They think that these efforts are going to dampen the efforts to organize. I can tell you it's only emboldened the workers from other nearby stores and in that store. We are going to continue to organize, even though administratively, because of Trump's actions at the NLRB, things are at a standstill. And you could do a whole show just on that. But, there's other ways to bring a company to do the right thing. And ultimately, what's very clear is that, and we experienced this in the lead up to the election here, is the consumers like these workers a lot more than they like Whole Foods, Amazon, or Jeff Bezos. And they have options. It's not the only store in town.
Right.
And while I am not here calling a boycott at this time, I think the more we share what this company's doing with the community, the more the community is going to make their own decisions. And at some point, I think money talks. And this company is going to have to deal with the fact that not only here in Philadelphia, but around the country, that they're turning their own customers away because of their own inappropriate behavior. They're treating these workers like indentured servants with a lash on their back. And as long as they continue to do that, they're going to lose business. Now, to this company, they're going to have to lose a lot of business before they get the message. But you know what? We've been around a long time, and we've been through tougher spots. We're not going to let go of this.
Absolutely. Wendell Young, president of UFCW Local 1776. If folks are at Whole Foods, they want to learn more, you can Google Whole Foods UFCW, and like one of the first links that comes up is a link to the UFCW's website where they say UFCW is the union for Whole Foods workers. So definitely check that out. Wendell Young, president of UFCW Local 1776. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting me. Take care. Thanks. Have a great weekend.
We're going to take a break, folks, and we will be right back with Boss Watch. The Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama local workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact April at our training center to start the process at 256-904-1753. No experience is needed. We offer free training, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is our mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power. The Valley Labor Report is also supported by the Communication Workers of America. Learn more at cwa-union.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America, better known as the UAW. UFCW. They are one of the largest and most diverse unions in North America, with members in virtually every sector of the economy. UAW-represented workplaces range from multinational corporations, small manufacturers, and state and local governments, to colleges and universities, hospitals, and private nonprofit organizations. The UAW has more than 400,000 active members and more than 580,000 retired members in the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. You can learn more about the UAW and join at uaw.org. The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by Labor Notes. Labor Notes is a media and organizing project that has been the voice of union activists who want to put the movement back in the labor movement since 1979. You can learn more about Labor Notes at labornotes.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Union leaders, do you want a powerful website and mobile app built just for your members? The Union Active system, created by Unions America, makes it easy to share news and documents, send alerts, and keep your members engaged anytime, anywhere. Trusted by thousands of unions, Union Active streamlines communication so you can focus on what matters most, your members. With real-time updates, secure messaging, and custom features built for unions, you'll keep your members informed and engaged 24/7. Get Union Active today. Visit unionactive.com to learn more. Union Active, the ultimate website and communication system for unions.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor, and you're listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. If you've got anything to add, you can give us a call and leave us a voicemail at 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. We'll take calls in the second half of the show, which is coming up momentarily. So you can get that number ready, and we'll be opening the lines at 11 Central, 12 Eastern. Before we go, we're going to get to Boss Watch. Every week, bosses are breaking the law. Every week, bosses are discriminating against workers, stealing from workers, putting workers in harm's way, and we are here to tell you about it first. We are here to tell you about it, folks. Here in Alabama, Ground Zero Biloxi, which operates a blues club in Biloxi, Mississippi, violated federal law by subjecting an assistant manager to sexual harassment. This is in Mississippi, not Alabama. I don't know why I said Alabama. Violated federal law by subjecting an assistant manager to sexual harassment by one of its co-owners and firing the worker for complaining about the co-owner's harassment. The U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission charged in a lawsuit. The EEOC charged that one of the Blues Club's co-owners subjected the assistant manager to a campaign of sexual harassment that included repeated unwanted sexual comments and multiple acts of forced sexual touching. The agency alleges that the assistant manager repeatedly complained about the co-owner's harassment to no avail. Despite these complaints, the agency claims, the club failed to take any effective action against the co-owner to stop him from sexually harassing the assistant manager. The EEOC further asserts that the club retaliated against the assistant manager by firing her shortly after she submitted written complaints to the club's chief financial officer against the co-owner. Such alleged conduct violates Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits sexual harassment in employment and retaliation against workers who oppose such sexual harassment. The EEOC filed suit in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Mississippi after attempting to reach a pre-litigation settlement through its conciliation process. The EEOC is seeking in this case monetary damages, including back pay, compensatory damages, and punitive damages, as well as injunctive relief designed to prevent such unlawful conduct in the future. Over in Florida, CEMEX Construction Materials of Florida, which manufactures and delivers building construction materials, violated federal law when it failed to accommodate an employee's request to wear a close-fitting skirt over her pants as required by her religion, the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission charged in a lawsuit last week. According to the lawsuit, CEMEX refused to allow an employee who is an apostolic Christian a religious accommodation that allowed her to wear a skirt over her work pants. The company denied the accommodation because of its policy against loose-fitting clothing. The employee only wore close-fitting skirts over her work pants and was in compliance with company policy. Ultimately, the company forced the employee to choose between wearing a skirt or losing her job. The employee chose to continue wearing a skirt, which led to her termination. Such alleged conduct violates Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which prohibits discrimination because of an individual's religion and requires employers to reasonably accommodate an employee's religious observance or practice unless doing so would cause an undue hardship. The EEOC filed suit in the U.S. District Court for the Middle District of Florida after first attempting to reach a pre-litigation settlement through its conciliation process. They are seeking compensatory damages in the case. In Missouri, the Carlstar Group, a Tennessee-based manufacturer of specialty tires and wheels, violated federal law when it discriminated against employees at its facilities in Clinton and Jackson, Tennessee, and Aiken, South Carolina, because the workers lawfully used certain prescription medications to treat their disabilities. The EEOC charged in a lawsuit last week. According to the suit, since at least January of 2020, Carlstar has denied opportunities to manufacturing employees when the company learned that those employees were lawfully taking certain prescription medications, including narcotics and opioids, for the treatment of disabilities, even after the employees were medically cleared to perform their job duties. The suit also alleges that Carlstar failed to consider or provide the workers with reasonable accommodations to the company's drug testing and substance abuse policy that would enable employees to work while lawfully using their prescribed medication. Such alleged conduct violates the Americans with Disabilities Act, which prohibits discrimination due to disability. The EEOC's suit filed in the U.S. District Court for the Middle District of Tennessee seeks monetary relief for workers harmed by Carlstar's alleged unlawful conduct and an order prohibiting future discriminatory conduct against disabled individuals. And finally, in Louisiana, oil field service companies Bigfoot Energy Services and Iron Mountain Energy, who operated as a single employer, will pay about $700,000 and provide other equitable relief to settle a lawsuit alleging race and sex-based harassment and retaliation brought by the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. According to the lawsuit, the company's employees, including management, frequently used the N-word and other racially derogatory terms when referring to black employees. Additionally, the companies failed to remedy the conduct of male employees who frequently engaged in sexually demeaning conduct, including sharing demeaning pornographic images of women and making sexually offensive comments. The day after a male truck driver complained about the sexually harassing conduct, he was fired. Other drivers were fired within days of complaining about workplace use of the N-word, the EEOC said. Such alleged conduct violates Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits race and sex discrimination, including race and sex-based harassment and retaliation. The EEOC filed suit in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Louisiana after first attempting to reach a pre-litigation settlement through its administrative conciliation process. In addition to the monetary relief paid to the affected workers, the 3-year consent decree Settling the suit requires the company to implement harassment and retaliation policies, train employees and managers on Title VII, sex and race-based harassment and retaliation, and regularly report to the EEOC on their training, policy modifications, and complaints of discrimination. Wrapping up with Union Busters, this segment of Boss Watch is sponsored by Labor Lab, which is an employer watchdog organization. They are committed to safeguarding the right to organize through unions, collective bargaining, and mutual aid. They do this by combing through the reports Union Busters are required to file with the Department of Labor. So here are last week's Union Buster filings. MGM Resorts International hired Government Resources Consultants of America to bust a union. The union election is still open. Cleveland Museum of Natural History also hired Government Resources Consultants of America. That election is still open. And Leslie Heating, Cooling, and Electric in Illinois hired LRI Consulting Services for $425 an hour, and that union election is still open. Cisco, Western Minnesota, hired Action Resources for $4,000 today, $4,000 per day. And Beacon Sales Acquisition in Indiana hired Frontline Business Resources for $212 an hour. Workers lost that union election 0-6, but the Union Busters did not file until after the union election was over. J.B. Hunt Transport Services in Illinois hired Omar Quadra for $150 an hour and LKLS Consulting for $225 an hour. Himco Waste Away Services in Indiana hired Davis Grimm Payne and Mara for $400 an hour. A decertification petition is open in that case. And in addition, the following filings were amended. Best Solutions 312 amended their filing for Amazon to add their employer identification number, and the Vendex Group amended their filing for Northwestern Medical Center to change their performance period dates. That is it for us on the program. Find us online, YouTube and Facebook at the Valley Labor Report to continue listening. We got a great second half lined up for us, but if you don't follow us, we'll see you next week. All right. We're off the air now. We're off the radio now. Appreciate everybody staying tuned. Like I said, we got a great second half lined up for you. We're going to be talking about the APWUTA, and we'll be talking to the co-chair for the National Political Committee of DSA. And talking some more about Musk and Trump. So lots of good stuff coming up. 844-899-TVLR. We're opening the phones right now, so go ahead and call in if you want to call in. And we will be right back.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell. Go to Harlan County, there is no neutral there. You'll either be a union man or a thug party H player. Which side are you on? Which side
You can manage your callers from the call-in studio web interface.
are you on? Which side are you on? Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
This is Overtime, a production of the Valley Labor Report, the largest union talk radio program and online news outfit in the South, coming to you from the heart of the Tennessee Valley in the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. We are run by working people and for working people in the South and all over the country. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We appreciate you spending some time with us. If you'd like to call in, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. And we do have a caller on the line. I think I know who it is. We're going to talk about this APWU contract, give you the summary, and then we'll take this call. So, this is really, really big news. The American Postal Workers Union, which represents how many people are in the APWU? It's like 150,000. Adam, are you looking that up?
Yeah,
it's a
over
good
200,000.
over 200,000 folks.
They got the whole highway closed. Yeah, weird.
I don't know if who is that? Okay, yeah. Can we mute them? The American Postal Workers Union represents over 200,000 postal workers, and that's like the clerks. Like you go into a if you go into a post office, the people that you see they're members of the APWU. They're represented by the APWU, right? And so all four of the postal unions have been negotiating contracts. Their contracts all expired a little bit different times. The NALC just went through their contract negotiation. They went through arbitration, got a contract imposed on them. And so now the APWU has a tentative agreement that the membership will vote on. The APWU said in a press release that the tentative agreement was finalized on June 2nd, 2025, and it was presented to the National Negotiating Committee by the National Negotiating Committee to the Rank and File Bargaining Advisory Committee on June 4th, and then the Rank and File Committee unanimously approved the tentative agreement for a ratification vote of the members. The TA has the unanimous approval of the National Negotiating Committee and the full support of the National Executive Board. APWU President Mark Dimenstein said this is great news for postal workers. Negotiations are never easy and have been hard fought. We have secured an agreement that continues to protect the rights and interests of our members in uncertain times. We have been negotiating when government workers in our unions are under severe assault and with the specter of postal privatization looming. Yet, even in this environment, the tentative national agreement contains annual wage increases, 6 full cost of living adjustments for career employees, no layoff protections, right? Protections against layoffs, including for tens of thousands of members with less than 6 years service, 50-mile limits on accessing, elimination of some entry-level steps, restoration of one more top step in pay grades 4 to 7 on the lower tier pay scale, increase in uniform allowances, and much more. All these gains were accomplished with no givebacks or concessions. A yes vote will secure the provisions and advances of the tentative agreement. And so here are a couple of those, a couple of the highlights. It's from a 3-year period, September 21st, 2024 through September 20th, 2027. The first and the increases over the 3 years are 1.3%, 1.4%, and 1.5%. The first year's 1.3% raise will be paid retroactively to September of 2024, so you'll get a little back pay check for the raise paid retroactively. It includes full cost of living adjustments for career employees. COLA will be paid the second full pay period after the release of January 2025, July 2025, January 2026, July 2026, January 2027, and July 2027. And APWU actually remains the only postal union with full COLA, so that's interesting. And they have some other stuff that's going to be kind of in the weeds for me on job security. It includes protection from layoff for career employees with 6 years of service. They also say any career employee on the rolls as of September 20th, 2024, but with less than 6 years of career service will be protected from layoff for the life of the national agreement. This provides at least 70,000 additional career employees protection from possible layoff. And it maintains the current moratorium on subcontracting of postal vehicle service work that's going to continue. Health insurance, no change to the Postal Service percentage contribution to premiums for those participating in the Postal Service Health Program. 95% Postal Service contribution to premiums of APWU Consumer-Driven Health Plan, CDHP. Increases, like I said, in union work clothes. There's some additional work rule changes, and all of that stuff is going to be, if you're a postal worker, that's stuff you're going to want to know and familiarize yourself as you prepare to vote on it, but it's probably a little bit in the weeds for us. And so if you're a postal worker, we would love to hear from you. 844-899-TVLR. If you're a member of the APWU, I want to hear what you think about this tentative agreement. Let us know. You can give us a call. We'll answer it live on the air. Or you can leave us a voicemail and we'll play it next week on the show. We do have Mark Dimenstein lined up to be a guest on next week's show, so looking forward to talking to him about this, but also mostly, I think, about the threats to the Postal Service, privatization, the new Postmaster General, stuff like that. And so with that, we've got a caller on the line, caller from a 970 area code. Caller from a 970 area code, what's your name and where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Palace Real. I'm one of the chatters. I did say I was going to call in. I'm from Kentucky.
Palace.
I'm a custodian.
Yeah, really appreciate you taking the time to call in. Where are you calling from again?
Kentucky. I usually call in from an 859 number, but
okay,
I have a VoIP number.
Yeah. No, that's just the state is plenty. Just interested in that. So really appreciate you calling in. You mentioned that you are an APWU member. You're a custodian, and so what is your reaction to the tentative agreement, and what has been the reaction of your fellow union members?
The blaring thing that's right there is the 1.3, 1.4, and 1.5%. I don't think that that's enough. I think it would be enough for me to vote no on. I feel like every APWU member deserves far more than that. But I know that it's not going to happen. The NALC had their contract negotiations. They went to arbitration. They were originally 1.3 across the board, and they went to 1.5%. The NRLCA came out with their tentative agreement that they're currently voting on. It's the exact same 1.345%. So realistically, that's not. It's really not something that's going to change. I know if we do vote no and it does get rejected, I think Dimenstein, even on your program, is probably going to lean into the fact that we have a COLA, we have full COLAs, and that layoff protection. And he's probably going to say something along the lines of, if we do go to arbitration, we do have a very high risk of losing that COLA because we're the only postal union that has that. And he's going to say that the post office has been trying to lay off clerks for a really long time, and this helps their case by keeping 70,000 people from being laid off. I don't think that's I understand that that's good concessions that we've gotten from the post office, but it's just, I feel like we deserve more money. I really do.
Right.
The grade 3, I honestly have no idea what a grade 3 employee is. I've never heard of a craft that's grade 3. Grade 4 is custodial. And they eliminated grade 3, so it's completely gone. And so anybody on grade 3 would be moved up to grade 4. They've removed the top step, which is JJ, on the pay steps. They removed that, and everybody would start on II, which is the very top step of the pay scale. If you did look at the chart on the APWU website, there's a pay information on there. You can see the scale, the chart, and there's a gray and there's a yellow. Everybody, mostly everybody would be going to the bottom of the I scale in terms of max out pay when they eventually max out. But everybody usually starts at that gray area unless they're grade 8, 9, or 10, which is maintenance, high maintenance, electronics technicians, and things like that. Usually people start at that gray scale and then they move all the way down to the bottom of the yellow part. So people were asking about that. It's just kind of.
Yeah. Can you explain for folks what the difference is between the APWU's full COLA and the other postal unions' diet COLA?
I personally don't know the full extent of it. I was only an NALC member for a little bit of time. I know they only, when you're first starting as an NALC member, as a city regular or whatever, you get a portion of whatever the COLA, the cost of living adjustment, was. So there's a percentage. Instead of 100%, you get some portion of that. And as an APWU member, whatever the COLA, the cost of living adjustment is, you get the full amount, no matter what step you are in. As a career person, PSCs do not get COLAs, but something that you didn't hint on is PSC, right? They get an extra 1%, and they're getting an extra 50 cents per hour after 26 weeks of working at the post office.
And what is PSE? What does that stand for?
I'm drawing a blank. It's
just
basically the clerks that.
It's the clerks that what? Sorry.
It's like the clerks that break down the trucks and stuff in the morning. They're usually the ones that do like the grunt work and things like that. I don't know what they're. I don't know what the PSE, the acronym, stands for exactly.
And so is that usually like a temporary position, like you're only a PSE for a short amount of time and then you move into something else?
PSEs are actually like CCAs. They work for basically 2 years and then eventually they get bumped up to the PTF position.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I was figuring it was something like that. So okay. And then you mentioned that you gave your arguments for why you're kind of leaning towards voting no. I think maybe you've even made the decision to vote no. It's because of because like the raises are just not enough. You need more money, and that totally makes sense. How are what about your coworkers? Do you think that's how your coworkers are feeling, or are your coworkers feeling like this is about as good as we're going to get in this environment?
Judging by the reactions of people, it sounds like this is what this is better than what the NALC got because of the layoff protections, because of the COLAs. They think, well, this is what we're going to get. And I mean, another thing was the night differential. I mean, a lot of the PSE is a postal support employee. That's what it stands for. But yeah, they usually work really early in the morning, and they would get night differential pay. That increased by 4% in September, and it's actually going to increase by 2% September 19th of 2026. So that right there would be a lot of extra pay for some of them. Not very much, but I mean, when you have to come in at 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, that extra a little bit helps, I would assume.
Right. For sure. Well, Palace Thrill, is there anything else that you think folks ought to know about, or do you have any other thoughts about the TA?
I mean, it sucks that we're going to have that. To me, I feel like it's likely going to pass.
Yeah.
I feel like even if we did go to arbitration, at least we're telling our union that we're not accepting the wages, regardless of what the NALC or the NRLCA got. I feel like we're showing the post office that we're capitulating. We're just accepting what they want us to accept. If anything, I would say that Diamondstein is doing more than Don Maston or Brian Renfro did. I think there are a lot of things that are good in here, and that's likely why people are going to accept it. But I'm going to still vote no just because of those wages. I fully believe that we deserve way more than what we're getting.
Thank you so much for the call. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. We're going to get to our scheduled guest. Ashik Sadiq is the co-chair of DSA's National Political Committee. Really excited about this conversation. Ashik, welcome to the Valley Labor Report.
Thanks so much for having me. So I'm calling in from the road. I'm driving between Detroit and Grand Rapids, Michigan on a chapter visit. So hopefully my internet holds out.
Well, great to hear from you. We can always go to audio only if it gets too bad. But you are, you're pretty like the National Political Committee is like one of the big ones in DSA. So you're like, one of the big guys for the DSA. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk to little old us. Can you talk to our audience about DSA? What is DSA? And, particularly, we're a union radio program. How do you see DSA as relating to the labor movement, like both philosophically and practically, if there are differences there?
Yeah, so Democratic Socialists of America is the largest socialist organization in the United States now and in many decades. The United States has a long history of the left. We had a Communist Party, a Socialist Party over a century ago that were impacting national politics. They were mass movements, but that after a lot that made the left.
Ashik, I do think that
DSA
I do think that we're going to need to go to audio only. Let's try that. You're breaking up a little bit.
All right, let's try that. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, you sound better.
Okay. I'm just going to keep talking until... Yeah, so DSA is the largest socialist organization in the U.S. in probably about a century. We have 80,000 members all over the country in all 50 states. We have about 200 chapters, and that's where most of the work happens locally in DSA. So we do, people may know us by our electoral work. We have elected members of Congress like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Rashida Tlaib. And at the local level, we have hundreds of open socialists in office that we've helped elect over the past almost decade now. So DSA grew really quickly, especially from 2016 through 2020, through the Bernie Sanders campaigns, like we endorsed. Bernie is not a member, but we grew a lot because democratic socialism has been revived as a movement in those years. So over the past 8 years that I've been a member, I joined in early 2017 when Trump was inaugurated. I happened to be living in Washington, D.C. at the time. So I really experienced a lot of that wave of DSA's growth from about 5,000 members in 2015 to over 80,000 now, 8 years later. So labor organizing is really at the core of what we do. The electoral work is at the core, but I really see that electoral and labor is kind of the pillars of everything else that we do. There are a lot of issues that our members are activated around and organize around. But it's really the strength of those things that I think makes us have an impact on anything climate organizing or internationalism or all the other things that our members care about that as socialists, that are part of our values. I think that in the United States today, they're only as strong as we are in, by getting people elected who share those values and advocate for them, and with strong labor unions where rank and file workers are prepared to, organize from the inside and make, the labor unions instruments of class struggle. So I think a lot of what activated me to the left was the climate crisis, for example. And through organizing in the early years, a lot of us realized that a huge sticking point in making any kind of progress on the climate crisis is that workers are not, just like the entire way our economy is structured, like fossil fuels and everything, a big fight in 2015 to 16 that activated me and a lot of people was the Standing Rock protests against the Keystone XL pipeline. where, as it turned out, a lot of the part of why that movement failed to prevent this pipeline from being built is because the building pipelines is something that building trades are in favor of. That's a pretty core thing where if environmentalists or indigenous people are protesting something that is a major source of jobs and there's no alternative, that's just a fundamental sticking point. So just the way that the environmental and labor movements had been kind of pitted against each other for many decades, like very intentionally by capitalists who own those companies, that just became a very clear thing where in DSA, as people who want to restructure the way the whole society works, especially because of the climate crisis, we just realized like whatever we're advocating has to be by and for workers. Like there's need to people talk about the just transition or the Green New Deal. There are all sorts of ways to describe it, but just at the core of it is like we want these parts of our economy that right now are structured by fossil fuel capitalists or just all these people who are only out for their own profits. We have to change that so that the workers are driving what that transition looks like to a green economy, to a sustainable future. So that's where we really started to focus on things like public power, public transit, and really thinking about how we organize workers in those sectors to make those changes happen in the way that actually serves their purposes. So a lot of our members have become like rank and file workers in like electricians or just in different trades, where the goal is to change those over the longer term to really drive what that transition looks like. So I think the best example is United Auto Workers. UAW reformed over the past few years after many like years and decades of efforts to organize it from the inside, and DSA members were among the organizers in UAWD that helped elect Sean Fain, and then when major contract demands against the big three automakers, and then over the past year after winning those contracts and just becoming more emboldened, also took major stances on like Palestine, like for an arms embargo against Israel. And that's a really big deal, just that to have major unions in the United States, UAW and I think 6 other major unions came out for an arms embargo after a year of genocide. So I think that kind of shows what our theory of change is, like not just organizing for particular issues or just in our workplaces for particular demands, but the idea of bargaining for the common good is something that's talked about a lot. Just like workers have the power to, ultimately to shut down the economy and threaten capitalist profits. And that's something that we want to use as an instrument, toward winning the world we want. So just thinking about how labor and electoral and all these other kinds of organizing intertwine to be way more powerful than they would be in isolation. Like we're not just getting people elected to office who are saying the right things and have nice platforms and then we hope for the best. We expect them to work with DSA and even to participate as members. Like I was in Detroit DSA's chapter convention last weekend, and they've helped elect several members to office, including Rashida Tlaib in Congress, and she attended as a speaker and also stuck around to vote in a meeting that had over 100 people in a union hall. So that's really cool. This is a sitting member of Congress who's showing up and not just giving a speech and then like dropping off.
You're breaking up again a little bit, but yeah, I think it is very, very, very cool that Rashida Tlaib still participates in Detroit DSA, even just as a member and doing the sort of member things. And, what you said about the importance of unions, in a broader political program has always been, sort of at the center of why I care so much about unions. Even before I was a DSA member, I read history, and my reading of the history really does put the ability of workers to withhold their labor, to stop production, to the fact that workers create all of the value in society. The way that I've read history really puts that at the center of any movement for positive change in this country's history. Everything that's ever been done to improve workers' lives has really been, workers and unions have been at the center of that. And so, being a part of my union and trying to remind my fellow union members about our centrality in making history, and reminding my fellow members about how much power we have politically has really always been kind of at the center of why I do this sort of work. And so, connecting it to a broader program in DSA makes a lot of sense. And so when you talk to union members, what is your pitch about why, as a union member, you should be a member of DSA? I don't know. We may have lost him.
That's a great question.
Are you still there? Uh-oh. He's gone. Maybe he'll be able to call back in. But yeah, we'll we'll be. That's I'm also interested in how he thinks that DSA members and unions should talk about their DSA membership to folks that are skeptical. My DSA membership is never something that I've been my DSA membership is not like at the center of what I do, and so I don't have those conversations with a lot of people. So I'm interested in how he thinks that folks who want to get people to join DSA should talk to folks who are skeptical.
Yeah, because just the name itself does trigger various reactions, right? So that's something I was thinking about in advance of this interview as well. What are some of the experiences and like best practices, and what has been found in those conversations, because there are folks who will be with you the entire conversation, and then you use the word socialism, and suddenly it takes a different turn. So I think that's something that we wrestle with.
Yeah. Ashik, do we have you back?
I think so. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yes.
Okay, great. But yeah, this is a really important question. I think we really, unions are political. Labor unions are a really important structure of organizing our power. We want that, people think about elections as political, like they're a place to advance our politics, like as the left, as like a working class movement. But in unions, I think there are two really good examples over the past 2 years. UAW and Teamsters are both major unions that had reform efforts and have had kind of interesting trajectories in the leadership of those internal reform efforts. You have Sean Fain and UAW who engaged politically over the past year in the Democratic endorsing Biden and then Kamala Harris, and then on the other hand, Sean O'Brien and Teamsters has kind of lead up to Trump, and that's a really interesting trajectory. These are both rank and file reform efforts that happened that were both change them from the inside, but then have taken these kind of interesting divergent tacks, and I think both of those unions have significant chunks of their membership that are, but there's just a lot of this is something that I think as labor organizers or members of our unions, as socialists, I think this is really interesting to discuss. Like, how do we organize to change our workplaces, and also fill out the perspective of how we organize people. So I mentioned Detroit DSA's chapter convention last weekend. There was a really interesting discussion about UAWD, the reform effort within UAW dissolved recently. So there's some interesting discussion by DSA members who were part of UAWD about what that meant, what are ways forward within UAW now that they have a reform leadership. So a lot of these, there's a lot of political stuff to figure out about how we make the union movement stronger in the United States. And I think why should union members be in DSA? I think if you're at all a political person and a worker in a union, DSA has a lot to offer in figuring out how to organize. And just at a basic level, we in DSA, we really want every member to know like how to organize your workplace, know what your rights are. Like every socialist should be able to have these kinds of conversations with coworkers. And I think about this a lot myself. Like DSA helped me unionize my former workplace. Like I worked for a nonprofit organization that was, kind of lefty, and we didn't have a union during the pandemic. There were a lot of we just kind of realized like, oh, we really need to get organized for all sorts of workplace protections that we didn't formally have, and we didn't know where to turn for help. There were 3 unions that we contacted that were organizing workers in our sector, but they were all too busy, and we only got it done because there were DSA members in our chapter in DC at the
Right. I don't know if you cut out or if you were done there, but yeah, I think that's all really important, and that's what I've heard from DSA members and union members across the country is that DSA has been really helpful in supporting the organizing work, particularly of the UAW, the Teamsters, and Starbucks workers, and so excited to see that work continue. Thinking a little bit more capital P politically, what does DSA make of the moment that we're in right now? And I was thinking, I was planning on asking this question generally, but obviously there's even the when people think of the political moment that we're in now, people think of the rift between Trump and Musk. But on that specifically, and then generally, what does DSA make of where we're at, where the Republican Party is going, where the Democratic Party is going, and what workers can do to build power and to build towards something better for themselves?
Yeah, in this moment, in some ways, I think this political moment is similar to when I first joined DSA in 2017. Trump had gotten elected for the first time. Now it's the second time. Bernie lost, and just, the left was really suppressed in that election, which we think led to that outcome with Trump winning. So I think this just happened. Like the Democratic Party is even less prepared to counter the rise of the far right in this country. They failed even worse than they did in 2016. So I think in this period, our building independent power is just, more important than it's ever been. And I think that's where, at the federal level, unfortunately, our power is pretty limited. We have fewer aligned members of Congress than we did 2 years ago because AIPAC, the Israel lobby, spent millions of dollars in the most expensive primaries in history in Congress to take out Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman because they were too pro-Palestine. So, this really shows the setbacks at the federal level, in part because we don't have a deep enough base to contest federal power at this moment. But at the local level, I think we are stronger than we've ever been, actually. We have a bunch of models in a few different states, municipalities across the country where DSA has helped elect socialists to office and has helped really deepen the base. And we're building the bench there. So we're looking at models like, we're going to talk about Zohran Mamdani. He comes out of the New York City DSA, and statewide DSA chapters have helped elect I think something like 9 members to the state assembly and state senate. So that's a block of socialists in office who are operating pretty independently against a democratic political machine that has enabled right-wing, corporate austerity politics. Zohran is running against Andrew Cuomo, who was governor of New York for the better part of a decade, enabling Republicans, even with the Democratic trifecta in government. Really did not advocate working class politics at all, suppressed a lot of things that could have passed in that period that would have made people's lives better. But DSA has helped elect a whole block of people. They have helped, working with, they've established a model of co-governance effectively, that even though they're not formally a party, they're working more and more like a party in places like New York State. So they've advanced major, housing policies. They've passed climate policies like the Build Public Renewables Act. which is a bill to expand renewable energy production by the state using public authority. And that bill passed with labor unions writing parts of that bill, like having project labor agreements, which I mentioned the rift before between environmental and labor movements. DSA has been the ones driving like a merger, like something that like that's so I think just really putting labor organizing at the center of what they're doing at the state level shows the model for what we're trying to do. So I think just winning things like that. Seattle DSA helped pass the largest minimum wage increase in the country, $20 an hour in Renton, Washington. So these are just showing what a real independent working class movement can do, like where Democrats have failed to pass meaningful climate policy or minimum wage. Like Joe Biden gave up on a minimum wage, like $15 an hour, like 2 months into his administration in 2021. So by contrast, like DSA has helped improve the lives of millions of people across the country because we've been building local and state power.
And, and it's not just in those places. DSA elected a state representative in Georgia, and a DSA member is running for Atlanta City Council this year. Kelsey Bond, she is, seems like, I don't know. I'm not in Atlanta. I'm not in Georgia, but it seems like she's running a good race, raised $100,000 in the first quarter of this year. And so, looking forward to tracking her progress in that city council race. And so how does DSA think about building power, specifically in the South? The South has always been a region of the country that has been, more difficult to organize, both in some ways for the left and for labor, and it's really important to bring along the South if we want to have big political programs nationally. And so, how is the DSA thinking about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned some of the most exciting things to come out of the South in DSA recently. So Kelsey Bond is a great example. Kelsey is running for city council in Atlanta, a really exciting campaign. And Kelsey comes fully out of DSA. Kelsey was a chapter leader of the Atlanta DSA chapter. I think they were co-chair last year. They've been on our national labor committee as an organizer. So Kelsey really demonstrates how labor organizing is at the core of our electoral program. Increasingly, more and more of the people who are running for office, including and especially in the South, are just fully DSA organizers and labor organizers. So Kelsey's an example. Gabriel Sanchez, who was elected to the state senate outside of Atlanta, is, I think, Georgia's first socialist in state government, representing a district that Newt Gingrich got elected in 40 years ago. So, so Newt Gingrich, who helped, fully realign the Republican Party to become more right-wing in the 90s and push the Democrats to triangulate under Bill Clinton's administration. There was a whole rightward turn of the country and deepening of neoliberalism through that decade that Newt Gingrich helped make happen. And now to have, a Latino millennial socialist representing that district, I think, shows demographic shifts, but also, we hope, represents a major shift to, on the national level that DSA is helping drive through chapters that are strong like Atlanta. So that's one example. Louisville, Kentucky elected J.P. Linenger to the city council, who also is a very active DSA member, organizer, and leader. So I think, examples like this show that our electoral program is not just for, liberal coastal cities like New York or San Francisco or LA. Increasingly, what we've done in those places is also working in places throughout the South. So yeah, I think increasingly our strategies can be, pretty similar across the country. Right now, I live in Wilmington, North Carolina, which is, it's a port city. It's probably the 6th or 7th largest city in North Carolina. But what I see there is just a kind of development that is really similar to what I see all over the country. They're the same kind of luxury condos popping up that look exactly the same as what you would see in in Detroit or in New York or in big cities. And it probably is just the same few developers doing the same thing, like real estate developers. So all these trends cost of living going up, just rent going up, people moving to cities like Wilmington in the South because they're cheaper, because they're being pushed out of cities like New York or LA or wherever. Happening all over the country, and that's that's like a demographic force for DSA to work. Like class formation is happening in real time, where I think a lot of kind of downwardly mobile people are moving into places that have existing like working class, usually racialized communities. And I think that DSA, the way we've been able to combine forces like that in places where we have strong electoral programs, I see those conditions in especially in cities throughout the South. So I think electoral is part of our work, but also labor organizing is something that in places where electoral work seems out of reach, I think a lot of our chapters have really focused on labor organizing in really productive ways. In Alabama, like the Birmingham chapter of DSA has really thrown down just to deepen labor organizing there. Chapters throughout Texas have really focused on labor organizing, especially at the state level, have made inroads into the state FLCIO. So I think there are a bunch of examples, but we really want to emphasize that, like the electoral work, there's not much point to it unless we have like a deeper base in working class organization. Right. So I think that's,
Absolutely. And the last thing that we wanted to talk to you about is, the biggest story right now in DSA, I think, is DSA member and DSA endorsed candidate Zohran Mamdani is surging in the polls for New York City mayor. The last poll, I think, showed him only single digits behind Cuomo, who's the front runner. Single digits in the final round. They have ranked choice voting for the primary in New York, and so after you go through all of the ones, the Zohran and Cuomo are the last ones standing, and at that point, Mamdani is only single digits behind. And I don't think there's been a poll since the debate, which I don't think went well for Cuomo. And so, I'm curious from your perspective, how did it happen that, a person who has put, being a DSA member and being a socialist so central to his campaign, how did he become, the person who can beat Cuomo? Like, if anybody beats Cuomo, it's going to be Mamdani. And so how did that happen? And then secondly, why should our listeners care? Why should the members of my union in Huntsville, Alabama care? Who is the mayor in New York City?
Yeah, so the Zohran campaign is just the most hyped thing for DSA right now. And I'm glad I can come on camera to talk about it now. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, and this is especially exciting for me. I never thought that a socialist would be a viable candidate for New York mayor. I grew up when Rudy Giuliani was mayor, who just oversaw this rightward turn in New York City. He, people across the country may remember him as the mayor of 9/11. He just fully milked that for all it was worth, and then ran for president. He's become totally reactionary. I mean, he always was, but it just has come to the surface in a moment when the entire country is going right. So Zohran represents, people may think of New York as a liberal city, a progressive city, but, it's very diverse. Spectrum. I grew up in a neighborhood called Bay Ridge in South Brooklyn that was very conservative for most of my life. It's a base of, it's become a more Arab and Palestinian neighborhood over the past 2 decades, but in a way that I think really represents, the whole gamut of politics in this country. Like, you'll see storefronts in Bay Ridge that are Arab-owned that will have a Palestine flag and also a thin blue line flag, for the NYPD. So it's just a combination of, it represents the working class. Like, to me, it's just the whole spectrum of, people who can lean more rightward, more conservative socially in a lot of ways, but then also newer immigrants. There are also a lot of younger people, like queer people who've moved to the neighborhood. So it just represents like a whole set of forces there. And like I talk about Bay Ridge in the context of the Zohran campaign, because New York City's DSA's first electoral campaign that they ran on their own, I think 17 or 18, was a city council race for a guy called Qadir El-Yatim, who was a Palestinian pastor, and he didn't win, but that was kind of the training wheels for New York City DSA to run their own electoral race. And Zohran Mamdani was one of the field organizers on that campaign, like almost 8 years ago. So he was one of the DSA members who helped organize an electoral campaign and then learned a lot through it. And then New York City DSA just got more and more ambitious year after year. They helped elect a whole slate of people to the state assembly, I think 4 years later in 2022, and Zohran was one of them, who then won state assembly office in Astoria, Queens. And then over 4 years has really just, developed a really impressive record of fighting for what we stand for as socialists, but really organizing with workers. Like as an activist, as an organizer, he just has so much credibility from, organizing with taxi drivers, with workers who are, he went on hunger strike for 2 weeks to help taxi workers win major contract demands. So he just has a lot of deep credibility with people, with workers and tenants across New York City who were not engaged electorally, especially immigrants. Like my family is Bangladeshi immigrants, and Bangladeshis are now, I think, one of New York City's largest immigrant groups. Probably you'll see signs when voting happens or any kind of public things happen, there will be signs from the city in English, Chinese, Spanish, and Bangla. And Zohran has very intentionally developed a base from very early on with Bangladeshi community groups that are organizing as workers, as tenants. When he did a campaign launch in the fall, the first speaker was a tenant organizer who spoke in Bangla, which is huge. As somebody who grew up in that community, it just is really meaningful for a lot of people, like hundreds of thousands of people in New York City who are not represented in the political system, are now represented by somebody, not just on the basis of identity, but as working class people. And that is really at the core of his campaign. That's why people are resonating so much. There's really been a kind of liberal identity politics that Democrats especially have used over the past few decades that a lot of people now see as hollow. I think the Kamala Harris campaign kind of represents a culmination of that, just leaning into identity politics, identity representation, but without, really advocating and fighting for the things that would really benefit most of the people of those identities or working class people. So I think Zohran really represents a style of politics that is very open about his identity, about his background as an immigrant, but it's really about the policies that will improve lives, of free buses, free childcare, rent freeze, municipal grocery stores that would control the cost of food. And it also, like Bernie did, really helps people understand the theory of change. That is, people have to organize to make these things possible. It's not just about getting somebody elected as mayor. It's about organizing the movements that will make it possible. So I think that makes it a meaningful contrast with, people bring up Brandon Johnson in Chicago as an example of, you can elect a progressive, but then look at all the issues that happen. So I think Zohran's campaign represents something qualitatively different. Like New York City DSA, I think, is a much more powerful organization at this point with a deeper base than has existed in places that elect a leftish leader. So I think it represents, it's going to be a big test for us, especially if he wins. I think it'll just open up a whole new set of problems for us to deal with. But to me, they're exciting problems, I think it's going to be a real test, but I think people are really excited about the prospect of figuring out what we do with that kind of power.
Yeah, it definitely will be a test, but those are the sorts of problems that you would want to have as a movement. You want to be in a place where you're thinking about actually wielding power rather than just critiquing power, which is what the left is relegated to so often, and where I think some people on the left get comfortable. They get comfortable being able to kind of critique without having to wield. And, you mentioned Brandon Johnson, and, Brandon Johnson, my understanding, and with the caveat that, I know basically next to nothing about Chicago politics, right? But, my read of Brandon Johnson was never that he was a DSA candidate. I think that DSA endorsed him. I think, maybe they didn't, I don't know, but he was a CTU candidate, right? He came out of the teachers union, and that was his base was like the teachers union, rather than DSA or a larger kind of political thing, which in some ways, from my perspective, might even be a better thing. Just kind of thinking out loud, that might, you would think that would be better than being rooted in DSA. Maybe you're rooted out of a union, but ultimately, what we've seen out of Brandon Johnson is that the folks in Chicago are really unhappy with his term. And again, I know next to nothing about Chicago politics. It could all be like BS, and that he's actually a great mayor and everybody should love him, and he's done lots of great things, and they just don't know it. Now, I have no idea, but I know his polling is terrible, like single digit approval support, and whether or not that's warranted, bad faith attacks are going to happen if Zohran is, if Zohran is elected mayor. And so, how is DSA thinking about wielding power in New York and trying to head off opportunities for bad faith attacks or bad faith criticisms, and making sure that you're able to make inroads and actually make people's lives better, so that even if there are bad faith attacks, and when they come, they will be insulated from that and say, like, okay, well, you're saying this, but my rent froze. You're saying this, but my wages increased. You're saying this, but groceries are cheaper, right? How are you thinking about actually wielding power and fending off attacks?
Yeah, so just want to correct, Chicago DSA did not endorse Brandon Johnson. They kind of stayed out of it. And I think they have developed some critiques of what happened. There were some reasons why they didn't endorse in the first place. But what I've heard, I forget the particulars, but I think in general, I've heard from Chicago DSA folks, part of their critique of why he's so unpopular, it seems like they did kind of pursue a more technocratic approach, even with, a progressive person with credibility from CTU, with strong labor backing. They still, I heard about issues like they didn't really fill a lot of the seats in the local government with people who were really aligned. So there wasn't a lot of meaningful enough change of the whole administrative capacity of the city. So I think that's what I've heard folks in New York City DSA and around Zohran's campaign talking about, like anticipating, like, all right, we have to come in ready to make appointments with people who are aligned and ready to drive a program, who have experience, and just know how things work. But most importantly is just about keeping people organized, like continuing to organize people. Like this was, the fundamental thing that the Obama administration, came in 2008 as president, just had organized so much grassroots energy. And then they just neutralized it as soon as he got into office, right? Because that wasn't really what they were trying to do. Like they didn't have a real transformative program. It was just the branding of hope and change. So I think that was a hard lesson for a lot of people on whatever existed of the left at the time. And I think now with Brandon Johnson, it just there was no outside organizing, or not enough, it seems. So I think with Zohran, just like his entire campaign, it's really about like organizing a lot of people and with the intention of keeping them organized. This is what Bernie Sanders talked about as president, as candidate for president. The entire theory of change was, the slogan, not me, us. It's about how people organize on the outside to change what happens in government. So I think, there's a lot we'll see how the campaign goes after next month. And then, if he wins the primary, then there's going to be a really hard fight in the general. Like I would expect, that might not just get from the establishment that is really threatened by Zohran and what he represents. Right. So I think we also look at examples in other countries, like in Mexico. That's a great example. Morena is a left Labor Party that now has state power. Claudia Sheinbaum as president. Has been in office for months now, and I think is the most popular president in the world with something like 80+% approval. Right. And that's because Morena has continuously organized a base. She communicates very intentionally. They have daily, morning updates, press conferences, just laying out what they're doing politically and why people should care and how they could keep supporting it. So I think that's a powerful model for left government. It's not just enough to win state office and tell people to hope for the best and trust us now. It's you have to keep organizing people. So I think that's throughout Latin America, actually, there are examples of left parties, labor parties that win government and then very effectively communicate, especially now using, social media, using video to reach people in ways that we're capable of now that didn't exist before. So I think just really thinking about mass communications to keep reaching people, to keep explaining to people what's happening in government. If there are blocks, here's why it's not happening. Here's who's stopping it. And yeah, just bringing pressure to bear, like laying out ways to organize, or just leaving agency to people on the outside to organize, like in unions or community organizations, whatever. It's like people in government either can work with outside forces like that, like working class organization, or they can be forced to. So maybe
Right.
if Zohran is mayor and there are blocks or whatever, if people keep organizing on the outside, those can be very strong forms of pressure. And like we're not going in blind. Like the NYPD is there. It's one of the largest armed forces in the United States. So and then they've been police unions have been a particular barrier to left politics in New York City's own past. I think the mayor when I was born in New York was David Dinkins, who actually was a DSA member. DSA was a much smaller organization then, did not have the power that we do today. But he came in, he represented, Black working class parts of New York. And then, a lot of people saw his term as kind of a disaster. It led to a right-wing turn that led to Rudy Giuliani becoming mayor. So I think there are lessons there too that a lot of people are looking, want to avoid that example.
Right.
But I think already just the forces that are organized now around Zohran's campaign, I think, represent a much deeper and broader base than it has existed in decades in New York.
Ashik Sadiq, co-chair of the DSA's National Political Committee. Ashik, thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thank you.
Yep. We'll be following up on that and see how the election goes. It's definitely exciting. Zohran is obviously great communicator, and he's done a lot of good work for working class New York residents. So, we got a couple of other commentary stuff that we want to get to. 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857 is the phone number if you want to call in. But before we get to that, a couple more hooks on the Musk-Trump stuff. But before we get to that, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the bill, the big beautiful bill. That Trump or that Elon Musk thinks is still too generous to poor people. There was a good article that the RSA, the Retirement Systems of Alabama, put out about the effects that it would have on Alabama's economy, and so this is obviously going to be relevant for most states, especially states where folks are going to be listening to us. Adam, can you talk to us about what the RSA had to say about the potential economic impacts of this article on this bill on Alabama's economy?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Retirement Systems of Alabama puts out their monthly advisor, their newsletter every month, and I always pay attention to that because there's some interesting things in there. And in particular, for June, there was an article by Joe Adams from Parka titled, "Wow, Alabama's $60 billion question." And he said Alabama relies on federal spending. Alabama residents do too. Alabama residents receive over $60 billion from the federal government. That's 23% of all personal income in the state. And, these payments, the transfer payments, include various things: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, veterans benefits, unemployment, Pell Grants, other stuff. And between an aging population, shrinking economic opportunities, there's, different factors involved, but the bottom line is that a lot of people are very reliant on these federal transfer payments. So to put the $60 billion in perspective, Alabama's 4 automakers generate $6.4 billion in total compensation, right? That's about 1/10 the amount received from federal transfer payments. In other words, a 10% reduction in these payments would have a similar economic effect on personal income as shuttering Alabama's entire auto industry. And I thought that was really remarkable to think about that. If 10% of federal payments were cut to Alabamians, that would be the equivalent of shutting down Toyota, Mazda, Mercedes, Hyundai, you name the entire auto industry in the state. That is a remarkable impact that we're looking at. And the article also goes on to note that the impact is more pronounced in rural areas. And, you know, it tends to be much more, there tends to be much more reliance on these federal transfer payments in rural areas than larger population centers. And what you see is that it's actually accelerated over the recent decades. And so it's more and more of a rural reliance, which sort of makes sense when you think about it. There's less job opportunities often in rural areas. And there tends to be, you know, less of a middle class, quote unquote, in many of those areas. And so I just thought it was relevant to put out there how reliant we are, because we often talk about how reliant the state of Alabama and many southern states, you know, how reliant we are on federal spending. Right here, we are in the Tennessee Valley, right? Many folks are familiar with TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority. We are in Huntsville, Alabama, the Rocket City, which is incredibly reliant on the federal sector. NASA, as well as the military industrial complex, employs a whole lot of people here. Many people you meet in this community are connected to federal jobs, whether they're a contractor or a direct federal employee at NASA, the Corps of Engineers, other agencies. But, you know, we often don't think about the just cumulative effect of all these different transfer payments and all the different benefits that folks are relying on just to make ends meet, just to survive. How many folks are out there who are totally reliant on getting that Social Security check every month, or who depend on those SNAP benefits to feed their kids every month? And so I think that was helpful to put it in context that the $60 billion that Alabamians receive in these transfer payments, again, is about 10 times bigger than the amount of income generated from the auto industry, which Governor Kay Ivey has said is the crown jewel of Alabama, right? You know, they have generously subsidized the auto industry in this state. They have come, you know, to their defense anytime workers have tried to organize at, you know, facilities like Hyundai or Mercedes. You see the Alabama political class, the business class, you know, the elites go running to the media. They start renting billboard space. They run commercials. They organize vote no campaigns. They fight really, really hard against workers organizing. But, you know, I think it's just, it's worth reflecting on how this bill, this, you know, budget reconciliation bill, really will impact everyone. Even if you are not directly on Medicaid, the attacks on Medicaid, the attacks on the Affordable Care Act, the attacks on SNAP, the food stamps benefits, and others will absolutely impact all of us. Just this week, there was a letter put out by Cover Alabama Coalition, and the North Alabama Area Labor Council was one of over 50 groups to sign on to this letter. It went to the lawmakers of Alabama, right, our state legislators and our governor, to let them know they should be speaking out as well against these harmful cuts in the U.S. House's budget reconciliation bill. And we're, you know, the folks who signed on to this letter were asking the state policymakers to contact members of Congress and express their concerns about the bill's negative impact, both on Alabama's families and Alabama's budget. Because another piece to this is that if this bill were to pass as it is currently written, the state of Alabama would be in the hole millions and millions and millions of dollars for next year's budget, right? And that is going to be a whole nother thing, a whole nother can of worms to get into next legislative session. So ultimately, it is an impact on the states. It's an impact on everyday working class people, because most everyone you know is touched by these federal programs. Again, even if you directly are not on Medicaid, you know someone who is relying on Medicaid, whether it's someone who has an elderly parent in a nursing home or a grandparent in a nursing home relying on Medicaid, whether it's, the teenage mother who gave birth, paid for by Medicaid, folks who are struggling with disabilities who are relying on Medicaid. And then there's the cuts to the Affordable Care Act subsidies, because I know a lot of working class people, the only way they've had health care the last few years was through those subsidies to the Affordable Care Act. And, I can speak personally to members of my union, IATSE Local 900. And I know this is not unique to our local. We do gig work. And so we do not have health care provided through a collective bargaining agreement, unfortunately, which I know is the case for many union members. And so our members rely on the marketplace. Either they work another job that provides health care, or they purchase it on the ACA marketplace. And it's really devastating, because many of our members are low income enough to where they would qualify for Medicaid were it expanded in this state. But Alabama, of course, is one of, about 10 states or so to not expand Medicaid, which, by the way, is also something else that is under attack in this bill. They're going to make it that much harder to expand Medicaid. They are basically disincentivizing the expansion of Medicaid through this bill. A couple of other just notes. For one thing, obviously, what is behind all these cuts? Well, some of it, frankly, is just to renew tax cuts for wealthy people and highly profitable corporations. It is ultimately a transfer of wealth. Take wealth from poor people and working class people and transfer it up. But it's going to make healthcare in Alabama, specifically, the attacks to the ACA subsidies are going to make healthcare less affordable for over 400,000 Alabamians who are currently relying on that. It's also going to cost about 10,000 jobs, as well as over $1 billion in GDP in 2026, right? So that's a huge economic impact. This kind of austerity could potentially tank our economy here in the state, and obviously not exclusive to Alabama, but the threats to health coverage in Alabama would not end there. If enacted, the bill would cost Alabama about $619 million in extra federal funding that would have helped cover the first 2 years of Medicaid expansion. So that's over $600 million we could have brought into our state, into our economy, that could have been circulating here in Alabama. That's not going to make it if this bill goes through. The jobs, right? And we always hear politicians love to brag about jobs, including some of the very same politicians who are proposing this bill that actually destroys jobs. People will lose their jobs. And it's not just people who work directly for Medicaid or Medicare, right? Think about the example of the nursing home, right? It is a very common experience that many of us are going to have parents or grandparents at some point or another who are going to have to go into some sort of facility. It's a reality that is tough to deal with, and most of us are going to deal with that reality at some point in our lives. And many working class families have to have a combination of Medicare and Medicaid to survive those family situations. But also, the people working in these facilities, right? How many jobs are going to be cut when these benefits are cut? Because that's how folks are paying for these services. A couple of other things I wanted to mention. It's going to freeze provider taxes, which is ultimately going to limit the state's future options for funding Medicaid by effectively forbidding legislators to increase fees on nursing homes, ambulance services, and other providers. So it doesn't just take health coverage away from low-income families. It does do that, but it also strips the state of the tools, flexibility, and funding needed to manage the state's Medicaid program. The bill would reduce retroactive Medicaid coverage period from 3 months to just 1. This change would leave many pregnant women and other Alabamians in greater medical and financial risk. It also would undermine a new law that the legislature just passed this year to remove red tape barriers to Medicaid coverage for thousands of expectant mothers. That was a good bill. We talked about it on the show. Representative Marilyn Land sponsored that legislation. You know, it's not anything radical. It's not a huge breakthrough, but basically it just streamlines the process so that a pregnant Alabamian can get on Medicaid quicker and can get to prenatal care quicker, can go to the doctor when they need to go to the doctor, can get medication that they need so that the mother and the child can be healthy and just have a better step towards a better life. So, all of these things are under threat. We also know that, the food stamps are under threat as well, which, again, is not just going to impact the people and families and children, and it's many, many, many children who rely on this. It's also going to impact the stores, the grocery stores, the farmers, everyone who's involved in the food industry. Because, again, millions of people across this country rely on these programs just to feed their families. And it's not even that these are super generous. If anything, the safety net that we have in place in the United States is far inferior to what we see in many other developed countries. It is a lot harder to be poor in America than it is in many other countries across this planet. And it's about to be a lot harder. So I just wanted to put that out there. This is going to have a huge impact on Alabama from our communities, our working class families, but also the state itself is going to be in a real bind. It sets up a huge budget fight and tax fight next year. It also, is going to be a variable for the 2026 election. As with many places, we don't just have congressional elections next year. Our entire state government virtually is up for election, from the governor to the attorney general, all the way to every single member of the state House of Representatives and state Senate. So the entire legislature is up for election. We've already heard a lot of chatter about Senator Tommy Tuberville running for governor in Alabama. Many people consider him to be the, far ahead favorite already at this point. Of course, there's a lot of questions because he doesn't actually live in Alabama based on a lot of the reporting that we've seen. So that could be a problem for him. But we've never seen, here lately, the rules don't seem to be much of a barrier for folks in politics. But that's going to be setting up an interesting fight with Tuberville because he's kind of in a bind, right? Does he vote for this bill knowing he wants to be governor next year and knowing it's going to tank his state's economy and his state's budget? That's a predicament to be in, right? Because he wants to please Trump. He very much is... I won't say what I was going to say. We're on the radio, but he likes to be in Trump's good graces, right? Senator Tuberville is very, very passionate about that, and he's got something to decide. The future of the state he wants to run versus his political relationship with the president. But I think it's really important that everyday folks be reaching out to their senator. I know it can feel like an uphill battle. It may feel like it's a waste of time. But believe me, they do take a tally of those phone calls, of those emails, of those letters and postcards, of those constituent visits. And there is, an overall impact that can be made. With enough pressure, politicians will change course. Even some of the worst, most reactionary politicians can vote for decent legislation or not vote for terrible legislation on occasion with enough public pressure from their constituents. So those of you who have not made any phone calls or reached out to your senator lately, put it on your calendar. Put a regular reminder. Check in with them every couple days, if nothing else. Make some phone calls to the D.C. office as well as their local offices in Alabama. You're probably only going to talk to a staffer, if anyone, if you actually get a hold of anyone. I would just encourage you to, don't cuss out the staffer. That's not going to help your case. But do let them know how these cuts will impact you and your family and the people you care about and your loved ones. Whether it is elderly folks, whether it's children, whether it's the working class folks in your community, in your neighborhood, it's going to hurt everybody. And, we've talked about some of the other aspects to the bill. You mentioned briefly earlier the cuts to energy jobs, right? So there are a lot of folks whose jobs are on the line. We've also mentioned recently the AI preemption that is in this bill that is very much irritating entertainment industry unions like IATSE, because what the bill would do is prevent states and localities from doing anything around AI, right? It is a federal preemption. They do not want state and local governments, red states, blue states, Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. The way it's written, none of them would have the authority to do anything about AI, which, as we talked about the other day, everyone wants us to believe AI is a game changer. It's going to change the world, change the economy. It's a new industrial revolution kind of technology. And this bill would prevent our own local and state officials from doing anything about it, no matter how passionate we may be. And so there are a lot of issues with this legislation. It is clearly a transfer of wealth to the top. It is a deep, deep attack on the working class and on the poorest among us. And it's going to just lower the floor. And that's something we were talking about yesterday with a group of folks. It's going to lower the floor of just basic living standards in this country. And we're going to have a lot more people that much more desperate, right? So even if you think you're pretty insulated from this, maybe you don't participate in any of these federal programs, maybe none of your immediate family does, you're absolutely going to be impacted by the economic impact of these cuts and job losses. You're going to be impacted by the impact on the state budget. You're going to feel it. You're going to notice that. And so we're going to see entire industries under attack, like the entire healthcare industry is going to be impacted by these cuts. So really important just to be organizing, to be talking to folks, let people know the facts, let people know what's really going on. It isn't too late. It is not too late to stop this thing. There have always been bad ideas that have been proposed that have not made it through. And so I think that's kind of the hope at this point. Talking to advocates who are, experts on Medicaid and SNAP and these other benefits, a lot of them actually expected the bill to be even worse than it was. And that is honestly thanks to the pressure they've already received. Mm-hmm. We've already seen some Republican lawmakers kind of waffle on some of these cuts. Even Tuberville himself has made some interesting statements about, Medicaid, Medicare, and those sorts of things. So there's a lot of opportunity. I'm not saying it's the only thing you should be doing, because obviously we're a union talk show. We love to organize workers. We think building power as working class people is our way forward. But, advocacy is an important tool in our toolbox. And it's important that we're reaching out, that they hear from regular folks, from union people, from working class people, from people who benefit from these programs and people who don't. So that is my homework for all of you, is to get in touch with your senator, let them know how you feel about this. It has already passed the House, so the Senate is the focus. And if your member of the House supported this legislation, you should get in touch with them as well and find out why and get some answers, because it's really, really one of the most devastating attacks on the working class we've seen in some time. And you put it in the context of these other attacks we've been reporting on in the last few months. attacks on our rights to organize, and our rights to have a union contract, which are under threat. Our rights to just live peaceably in our neighborhoods, right, without fear of deportation or crackdowns on free speech. It's just really disturbing to see this kind of austerity budget in that context, right, which makes it all the more worse. So I just encourage folks to get involved and learn more about what's happening and find ways to educate your neighbors about it, because again, everyone is impacted. Everyone is touched by these programs and touched by this budget, and is going to feel it.
Yep. We got one more thing that we want to talk about, and it's kind of related to this. The Elon Musk has broken up with Trump over this big bill that still gives too much money to poor people for his liking. And frustratingly, there are a lot of Democrats who are seeing this not as an opportunity to attack a disjointed coalition on the Republican side, not as an opportunity to strengthen forces in opposition to both of these people, but rather as an opportunity to see Elon Musk as a free agent and bring him over to our side.
Absolutely absurd.
Representative Ro Khanna is one of these people. He represents Silicon Valley, one of the wealthiest congressional districts in the country. And Ro Khanna does a lot of good stuff, but this has always been a huge blind spot of his. And, his being willing to give Elon Musk the benefit of the doubt for some reason. He has been telling reporters and tweeting about how Democrats should, quote, be in dialogue with Musk. Khanna said, "We should ultimately be trying to convince him that the Democratic Party has more of the values that he agrees with. A commitment to science funding, a commitment to clean technology, and a commitment to seeing international students like him." And, you got to ask the question, why do you believe that Elon Musk has a commitment to science funding? Why do you believe that Elon Musk has a commitment to seeing international students? Why do you believe that Elon Musk has a commitment to any of these things? He doesn't. He has a commitment to him and his power. And it's just so
stupid. It doesn't track with the reality we've witnessed over the last few months. Right?
I mean, we're in the middle right now of an Elon Musk started dismantling of all the safety and health and worker protections within the federal government. And so obviously people have been trashing on Ro Khanna, saying this is really dumb. Correctly, it is dumb. And Ro has said, if Biden had a big supporter criticize him, Trump would have hugged him the next day. When we refused to meet with Robert Kennedy Jr., Trump embraced him and won. We can be the party of sanctimonious lectures or the party of FDR that knows how to win and build a progressive majority. And that's just so very silly, because the way that you're not going to win a progressive majority with somebody, especially now like Elon Musk, who most of the country has been negatively polarized against. Most people do not like Elon Musk. And that is one of the big reasons that Trump is okay with this happening, is because Elon Musk was one of the least popular parts of the Trump administration. And we want to bring him on to the Democrats. It's just so ridiculous. But Ro Khanna isn't the only person doing this. Matthew Iglesias, one of the Abundance Bros, has been talking about this. He says, "I feel like Jeffries and Schumer should give Elon Musk a call and tell him about the Democratic Party's long-standing interest in electric cars, solar panels, space exploration, and balanced deficit reduction. I don't know that it played a major causal role in anything, but holding an EV summit at the White House and not inviting Tesla was genuinely one of the most brain-dead political ideas of all time." And no, it's not. Somebody pointed out, again, like I just said on Twitter, he said, this Twitter commenter said, Elon Musk is one of the least popular figures in American politics, 40% favorable, 53% unfavorable, holding some of the least popular opinions in American politics. The belief that Social Security is a Ponzi scheme, for instance. And Matthew Iglesias said he's got a lot of money, though. And, there you go. Being willing to sell yourself to the highest bidder, though, is not a popular thing. And Elon Musk's money specifically, there is a huge question about how valuable that is actually going to be, because we saw what happened in Wisconsin, where Elon Musk spent millions and millions of dollars and still lost by huge margins. Right? And so the money, when it's Elon Musk's money, it comes attached to him, both politically, publicly, and also, pragmatically. Like, he is going to, just like we're seeing with the Trump breakup, he is going to want something for that money. And, I think this is all being driven by these types of people being antagonistic towards unions. We see from this Welcome Fest thing, it was a big abundance sort of get together. There was a panel where this podcaster, Josh Barro, talked about how what's coming up now in the abundance movement is that is a coming confrontation with unions. Let's listen to Barro at this centrist convention.
A lot of abundance fans here today. When I look at policies in New York that stand in the way of abundance, very often if you look under the hood, you eventually find a labor union at the end that is the driver of that.
Another abundance bro, and Josh Barro, he's just a reporter and a podcaster, but this guy, AJ Manasseh, is a private equity investment guy who is big on the abundance train, and he tweeted, if one good thing comes from the abundance discourse, it is that more people left, right, and center are waking up to the inconvenient truth that labor unions are the single greatest obstacle to America's economic growth and prosperity. They have morphed into little more than parasitic shakedown cartels. Crush them. And so it's just, that's why these people feel like they can make common cause with somebody like Elon Musk, who his tenure in government was really defined by busting unions, by firing union workers in the federal government. And this abundance conference it was sponsored by people like Reid Hoffman, LinkedIn co-founder, the Walton family, the people famously Walmart anti-union. The Walton family is one of these people, some of the folks funding the abundance stuff. Michael Bloomberg, the Murdochs, it's just so crazy.
Well, and the thing about this that really kills me is this has basically been the Democratic Party's approach and strategy.
It's not working
for decades, right? We had Bill Clinton and the DLC and, the Third Way and all that kind of garbage in the 90s. It really started before then, as we've talked about on this show before. It dates back to Jimmy Carter and that era of the Democrats starting to embrace neoliberalism and embrace wealthy donors in exchange for work, as they, continue to lose working class votes. They catered to the rich more and more and more. And they have done that over the last few decades. And so this idea of here's how we can win. We'll just have our own billionaires. That's not a new idea. Mm-hmm. That's the shit you've been doing for years, for a long time. Bloomberg being a great example of that. And so there's nothing new here. There's nothing, there's no breakthrough analysis. It's just the same warmed over centrist neoliberal bullshit that we've been getting for decades. But I think they're telling a lot by exposing how they have a hatred of unions. And again, unions are just a tool for working class people to have power over our lives. Some unions are better than others. Some unions are more democratic. Some are more progressive. Some are, more top down versus bottom up, blah, blah, blah. They're human institutions. They vary in a lot of ways. But bottom line, they are a tool that working people have to actually have a voice at work, where we create the value of this country and where we spend most of our lives. And that's not a lot to ask, to have a voice, to have a structure in place that we as working people can actually have a little bit of a say-so over our lives. And to think that that is the obstacle to progress, what does the progress look like to you that unions are standing in the way of? Because I don't see how safety on the job, democratic input of the workers, better wages, guaranteed retirement, guaranteed paid time off, family life, a balance with your work life and your family life, having the opportunity to go to the doctor when you need to, having the assurance that if something goes wrong at work, you can report that. You can speak up. You don't have to do something unsafe, right? You can say something about that. If you're discriminated against, if you're sexually harassed, you can actually have people to have your back, and you don't have to just sit there and take it. That's what a union's about. And I think that that's standing in the way of progress. Well, what the hell kind of progress do you envision? That somehow workers, organized workers, are like standing in the way of that. I don't know. For me, progress would be better quality of life for working class people.
Yeah.
That's progress, because we, as we've been talking about, like, we are behind. We are behind most of the rest of the world in terms of healthcare, retirement, paid time off, education, infrastructure, you name it. And Alabama and much of the South ranks at the bottom of the United States. Right? So working class people here in Alabama are worse off than workers in a lot of places in this world. And to think that we're somehow the problem is total garbage.
Yeah. All right, that's it for us this week, folks. Appreciate y'all tuning in. Make sure you like the stream, subscribe to the channel, donate at tvlr.fm/donate, get our merch at tvlr.fm/store, sign up to our newsletters at tvlr.fm, leave us a comment, tvlr.fm/donate, leave us a voicemail at 844-899-8857. Yeah, and we got a couple of plugs.
Yeah, I did want to make sure I did a shout out to Labor Notes, because they do have some really important things coming up. They will be doing their Secrets of a Successful Organizer training series June 16th online, 6:30 p.m. Central. If you've never attended that training, you really, really should. Everyone listening can benefit from having some organizing, skills and knowledge. It's not that we all are organizers, but we all do organizing, right? We all do organizing in our own various ways, and it's really, really helpful to have that training. But the main thing I really wanted to lift up is that Labor Notes has a national call on June 17th. This, again, at 6:30 p.m. Central, Beating the Billionaires in 2025. So following the presidential election, CEOs are eager to use 2025 to bust our unions and divide working people like we've never seen. From public workers to the building trades to everyone striving to win their first union, we all have a ton on the line. It's time to get organized to fight. So again, that's June 17th, 6:30 p.m. Central, the Labor Notes National Call, Beating the Billionaires in 2025. Really recommend folks sign up for that. I know I will be registering for that as soon as this show is over. So want to thank everyone for tuning in, and just remind folks to leave us a voicemail throughout the week. We really do appreciate that. Let us know what's going on in your neck of the woods. And we always appreciate folks letting us know about potential guests and potential stories. So if there's something interesting to you that you think is relevant to working people here in the South in particular, definitely hit us up. And, thanks again for tuning in, and look forward to seeing y'all next week.
See you then.